A queen is about to choose darkness while the whole palace watches, not because she was born into it, not because anyone forced the cloth into her hands. She is given one last clear look at the world waiting for her, and she turns away from it herself. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in Gandhara. The air is cooler here than in the Great Plains. It comes down from the high roads, and stone passes with a dry, clean edge to it, carrying the smell of cedar, horse leather, and distant snow. Caravan bells drift through the morning like soft metal birdsong. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, merchants are already arguing over lapis, wool, spices, and good mountain horses with the solemn intensity of men discussing the fate of the universe. It is, in truth, mostly about horse teeth. Inside the royal halls, the day is warmer. Oil lamps still burn in long rows, though dawn has touched the eastern sky. Their flames tremble in shallow bronze cups. The stone beneath your feet is smooth and cool. Fine rugs from Bahalika and beyond soften each step. Silk brushes silk in the corridors. Gold glints, anklets chime. Servants move quickly, but not noisily. This is a palace that knows how to listen. And at the center of that listening hush is Gandhari. She is not yet the woman the world will fear, pity, praise, blame, or mourn. She is a princess in her father's house, a daughter of Gandhara, a sister to Shakuni, sharp-eyed and sharper-minded. She has grown up among mountain roads, guarded gates, and the disciplined grace of a court that survives by noticing everything. She knows the weight of silence before a treaty. She knows the difference between courtesy and surrender. She knows when a room has changed temperature because someone has brought unwelcome news. This morning, the room has changed. The messengers from Hastinapura have already come and gone. Their horses were foam-flecked from the long road. Their banners carried the mark of the Kuru house, ancient and heavy as fate. Their words were respectful. Their offer was magnificent. A marriage into the greatest royal line in the land, a queen's path laid out in sandalwood and duty. But royal offers are like sweet mangoes in hot weather, very appealing, also full of hidden fibers that get stuck in your teeth. You can feel the strain in the women attending her. They fold garments too carefully. They avoid one another's eyes. Someone sets down a tray of jewels and nearly drops a bracelet. Someone else brings jasmine oil and spills a little on the edge of the bronze dish. The scent rises thick and sweet. Gandhari sits very still while they dress her. First, the fine inner cloth, then the heavier silks, pale and rich beneath the lamplight. Then the ornaments, cool gold at the wrists, a girdle at the waist, earrings that sway when she turns her head. Her hair is combed and parted, dark, heavy, fragrant with oil. A line of red is touched to the parting. Flowers are threaded in, white jasmine, a little champaka. The whole chamber smells like a garden trying very hard to behave itself. And still, the truth waits. Dhritarashtra. That is the name carried into Gandhara with all the weight of the Kuru throne behind it. Son of Vichitravirya's line, Prince of Hastinapura. A man born into greatness. A man who cannot see. You are there when the knowledge settles fully into the room. Not all at once, like incense. First a thread, Then a cloud. A maid whispers it. An older nurse confirms it. A counselor lowers his voice and says the marriage remains honorable, glorious, beyond refusal. The elders begin arranging their expressions into something called acceptance, which is a dignified word for panic in expensive fabric. Outside, in the courtyards, horses stamp, harness rings softly. The marriage train is being prepared. Chariots stand ready. Gift chests are loaded. Elephants shift their weight under embroidered cloths. Men shout for ropes, poles, water skins, ceremonial umbrellas. Royal departures are always presented as serene. They are not serene. They are an organized storm with musicians. And Gandhari hears all of it. She hears the rustle before anyone kneels near her. She hears the careful breath before someone tells her what everyone now knows. Her future husband lives in darkness. The palace she will enter is one she will first meet through his condition, through his absence of sight, through the strange mercy and cruelty of a fate chosen for her by men who do not have to wear the bridal silk. She does not weep. That is the first astonishing thing. No shattered bracelets, no collapse, no plea sent running down the hall to her father. She sits in stillness so complete that the lamp flames seem louder than she is. Then she rises. The women step back. You can hear it, silk shifting, bangles touching, a soft intake of breath from someone too young to hide it. Gandhari stands at the threshold between the chamber of her girlhood and the road that will carry her east. The light from the doorway lies warm across the floor. Dust motes turn slowly in it. She asks for a length of cloth. Just cloth. Nothing jeweled, nothing ceremonial. No priest has prepared for this part. No steward has a scroll explaining how to arrange the moment. One servant, trembling, brings a long strip of fabric. Fine, soft, strong. It smells faintly of cedar chest and fresh washing. For a heartbeat, no one understands. Then everyone does. The chamber goes silent. Not ordinary quiet, not court quiet. This is the kind of hush that falls when a choice is so unexpected it seems to push the air out of the room. Even the anklets stop speaking. Gandhari lifts the cloth. You are close enough to hear it slide over her fingers. She folds it once, then again. She brings it to her face. The jasmine in her hair stirs as she moves. Oil lamp smoke threads upward. Somewhere far off, a conch sounds from a temple tower, long and low. Morning has arrived, and with it, the whole machinery of kingdom, marriage, alliance, ambition. She places the cloth across her eyes. There is a murmur, then none. The knot is tied behind her head, and that is all. No thunder, no heavens breaking open, just cloth against skin. Darkness chosen in a bright room. A princess standing upright while the people around her forget how to breathe. In a little while, she will leave Gandhara. She will travel over long roads. The wheels will groan. Dust will rise gold in the sun. She will go to Hastinapura, to the wide riverlands, to the ancient palace where blind love, fierce pride, holy vows, and dangerous sons are already waiting. She will learn halls by echo, voices by grain, intentions by pause. She will become wife, queen, mother, warning, grief. But not yet. For now, you remain beside her in that chamber. You can smell the lamp oil, the jasmine, the horse sweat from the courtyards below. You can hear the creak of leather harness, the flutter of pigeon wings along the roofline, the tiny clink of a bracelet against another, because one maid still cannot stop shaking. And Gandhari, with the whole day open before her, turns toward a world she will no longer see. Tonight, you will go with her. From the clear mountain light of Gandhara to the long murmuring corridors of Hastinapura, from bridal silk to rough grief, from the first knot of cloth to the last fire in the forest, you will stand beside her as sons are born, vows are spoken, dice strike polished wood, conches call armies to the field, and a mother listens for footsteps that do not return. The palace doors are opening now. The journey begins in darkness. Before the cloth is tied, though, you still have sunlight on your face and the long road from Gandhara ahead of you. The air there is different. It comes down cold from the hills and slips under your sleeves before sunrise. It carries dust from caravan roads, cedar smoke from cooking fires, horse sweat, wool, crushed herbs, and that thin, clean scent of stone after night. Gandhara is not soft country. It does not coddle anyone. It sharpens them. Gandhari grows there. Not yet a queen, not yet a mother of doomed sons. Just a king's daughter, moving through long courtyards of pale stone, while servants sweep the dawn dust into neat lines. Her father's halls are elegant in the way mountain kingdoms often are. Less gold dripping from everything, more discipline. Straight pillars, heavy doors, fine wool hangings, bronze vessels polished bright enough to catch the morning sun. You can feel the place making her. In Gandhara, people learn to notice what matters quickly. A caravan arriving late can mean snow in the passes. A horse breathing wrong can mean fever in the stables by morning. A smile offered too soon in court usually means someone wants something. Nothing is ever merely decorative, even when it is beautiful. And Gandhari is beautiful. Everyone says so, of course. Princesses are always beautiful in these old palaces, at least according to the poets and the aunties and the men, hoping for favorable alliances. But with Gandhari, there is something else. She listens longer than most. She answers carefully. She has the unsettling habit of pausing just a heartbeat more than court flatterers enjoy. It makes fools reveal themselves. She grows up among brothers, counselors, messengers, priests, old nurses, guards with cracked heels, scribes with ink-stained fingers, and merchants from lands so far away their vowels sound like foreign coins. And among them all is Shakuni, her brother, lean, quick, clever, Shakuni, with eyes that missed nothing and hands that are always doing something, turning a ring, tapping a railing, rolling nuts or carved pieces across a table just to see where they land. He can make a bored afternoon dangerous in under a minute. He can make a simple game feel like a campaign. If there are sweets cooling somewhere in the kitchen, he will find them. If there is trouble brewing in the court, he will smell it before the priests do. As children, they move through the palace like two minds learning the same language in different tones. He teases, she watches, he provokes, she measures. He laughs first. She laughs after deciding whether the joke is worth it. Sometimes they race along the upper walkways where the wind hits hard enough to snatch a veil loose. Sometimes they hide behind carved screens and listen to visiting envoys puff themselves up like peacocks. Sometimes Shakuni imitates dignified old ministers until Gandhari has to press her hand over her mouth to keep from laughing out loud in the middle of a solemn afternoon. There is a rhythm to those years. Temple bells at dawn, caravan bells by noon, the slap of sandals in corridors, the mutter of ledgers, the clink of harness buckles, the evening songs of women grinding grain below the palace terrace, and over all of it, mountains holding the horizon steady. You are there on one of those mornings, standing beside a colonnade while the sun lays gold across the courtyard stones. A groom leads in a chestnut horse from Bahlika, all restless pride and flaring nostrils. Somewhere nearby, someone is frying dough in ghee, and the smell reaches even the royal steps. A court life can be very lofty until breakfast appears. Gandhari learns early what a king's daughter is for, not cruelly, just plainly. She is taught lineage, law, ritual courtesy, household management, the names of neighboring rulers, the debts between families, the old grudges no one writes down but everyone remembers. She hears stories of queens who preserved kingdoms through patience, queens who inflamed them through vanity, queens who bore heirs, queens who failed to. In palaces, girls are often praised for their eyes, their hair, their grace with garlands and lamps. Gandhari is praised for memory. She remembers the order of guests in a hall. She remembers which tributary floods in which season. She remembers who smiled when they should have frowned. She remembers what was left unsaid. Her father notices. So do the ministers. So does Shakuni, who discovers early that there is no point lying to his sister unless he has prepared for at least 3 follow-up questions and 1 devastating silence. Sometimes he does try. He returns one evening from the stables with dust on his shoulders and innocence painted much too carefully across his face. Gandhari takes one look at him, smells horse on him, hears laughter leaking from the far side of the courtyard, and asks whether the royal falcon really accidentally got loose, or whether he and the stable boys wanted to watch 3 senior attendants lose their minds. He tries to look offended. He fails. She is not severe. Not then. That comes later. In youth, she can be warm, even playful, but never vague. There is an inward steadiness to her, a sense that she is already practicing for burdens no one has named yet. The seasons turn. Spring brings almond blossom and trade. Summer brings white heat on the courtyard stones and servants moving slower by mid-afternoon, all dignity melting gently under the sun. Then the monsoon breaks somewhere farther east, and though Gandhara does not drown in rain the way river kingdoms do, the roads darken, the earth smells richer, and the wind carries a brief mercy through the palace windows. In the women's quarters, old attendants tell stories while combing out Gandhari's hair with fragrant oil. In the audience hall, men discuss taxes, border skirmishes, grain, and alliances, while pretending these things are separate. In the training yards, boys become warriors, and warriors become proud and prideful men, which is only one step apart. Shakuni becomes sharper with age, not bigger in spirit, sharper. He watches games, he learns patterns. He likes the moment when one person thinks they understand the board and realizes, too late, they have been walking where someone else wanted. He is not cruel for sport, but he does enjoy winning in ways that leave people blinking. Gandhari sees this too. There are evenings when brother and sister sit on a terrace above the road, sharing pomegranate seeds from a silver bowl, while below them a long caravan rattles in at dusk. The bells on the mules make a music all their own, bright, tired, dusty. Traders call to one another. Wheels groan. Camels complain in that offended way camels have, as if the whole enterprise of travel is a personal insult. Shakuni talks about distant courts, Taxila, Kamboja, Matsya, Kuruland farther east. He wants to know which rulers are weak, which are old, which have no sons, which have too many sons. He speaks of power the way some boys speak of horses, always assessing stride, breeding, endurance, where it might be broken or turned. Gandhari listens and peels another pomegranate seed free with her thumbnail. If she answers, it is often with something quieter. She asks who keeps faith with treaties, which queens influence their husbands, which princes are brave only in rooms where no danger is present. She is interested in the human grain of things. That difference matters. He is already thinking like a player. She is already thinking like a ruler's wife. Not yet by name, but the shape of it is there. The proposal arrives with dust. Important news often does. One afternoon, the watch calls down from the outer walls. Riders approach from the east under Kuru banners. The palace stirs at once. Servants run. Water jars are filled. Guest chambers are aired. The kitchens begin their panic, which is always the truest sign of diplomacy. Somewhere, a cook learns that twice the expected number of noble guests has appeared and quietly has a spiritual experience. You can hear the change before you see it. Hooves on stone, harness rings, men calling for room, the creak of leather, the soft grunt of unloaded pack animals, the formal announcements at the gate. The envoys come from Hastinapura. That name carries weight all by itself. The Kuru court is old, powerful, vast in memory, if not always in wisdom. To be linked to that house is no small thing. By evening, the halls of Gandhara glow with extra lamps. Brass trays shine. Fine carpets are laid. Servants move as if one wrong footstep might start a border conflict. Gandhari is summoned, not to the first council. Men love to make women wait, while pretending the waiting is honor. But she is not left ignorant for long. Her father receives the envoys. Gifts are laid out. Courtesies are exchanged. Names are spoken with care. Then the matter comes clear. A marriage is sought for her. The groom is Dhritarashtra of Hastinapura, eldest son of the Kuru line by birth, a prince of immense strength, raised in the greatest court in the north, guarded by Bhishma himself, tied to a throne older than many kingdoms. That is how such things are said at first, with Polish, with banners still fluttering in the courtyard, with wine still being poured. The women's chambers hum that night. Attendants whisper while folding garments. Older ladies tilt their heads and say what a splendid match it is. One praises the Kuru wealth, another praises the reach of their alliances, a third praises the groom's lineage with such enthusiasm that you suspect she knows something inconvenient and is trying to outrun it. Gandhari sits very still while her bracelets are removed for sleep. She knows enough already to understand the shape of duty. A princess is not asked whether she would prefer a poet, a handsome fool, a man with broad shoulders, and no court enemies. She is asked to step where the kingdom needs her to step, gracefully, if possible. And yet, there is a hesitation in the air, a missing note in the praise. Shakuni feels it too. He comes late, after the formal dinners, after the courtiers have exhausted themselves admiring one another's dignity. He is restless, more restless than usual, and when he dismisses the servants from his sister's chamber, he does it too quickly. That is when she knows. Something has been held back. The lamps are low. The room smells of sesame oil and the last sweetness of jasmine. Beyond the lattice, night wind brushes the palace wall. Shakuni stands there, not lounging now, not joking, not making some clever remark to soften the edge. He tells her, Dhritarashtra is blind, not dim-sighted, not weak in one eye, blind from birth. The words alter the room. It is strange how quickly that happens. A chamber can remain the same size, the same temperature, the same arrangement of rugs and cushions and lamp niches, and yet, after one sentence, it no longer feels like the same place. It feels smaller, thicker, as if the air has learned a secret and become heavier with it. Gandhari does not answer at once. You can almost hear the wick in the lamp. Blind, the prince of Hastinapura, the man she is being sent to marry, the future that has been carried across mountains to her on polished tongues and carefully loaded horses. Blind, Shakuni tells her more, enough to make plain what has happened. The Kurus have not sent a broken man. They have sent for a wife, for a prince who is still formidable, still noble by birth, still dangerous to dismiss. But they did not lead with the truth. Of course they did not. Men conducting marriage alliances can wrap an omission in silk and call it courtesy. Shakuni is furious in the way only he can be, sharp, contained, glittering at the edges. He speaks of insult, of concealment, of sending a princess of Gandhara into a court that should have spoken plainly. Gandhari listens. Then she asks practical questions. Who else in the Kuru house stands near the throne? How old Dhritarashtra is, whether he is respected, whether the marriage can still be refused without dishonor, what her father has already promised. It is the kind of questioning that makes brothers either adore their sisters or fear them slightly. In this case, both the answers are not comforting. Bhishma has asked. The envoys have come far. The alliance matters. A refusal now would echo. Her father meets her the next day. He is not a cruel man. He is not careless with her. But he is a king before he is only a father. And kings are forever being pulled apart by those two truths. He speaks to her of duty, of family honor, of the greatness of Hastinapura, of the strength still possessed by Dhritarashtra, of the life she may yet shape there. All this is true. All this is incomplete. The morning sun falls across the mosaic floor while he speaks. You smell warmed stone, ink, old wool, cedar smoke from the braziers in the outer hall. Somewhere in the courtyard, a peacock cries with the exact tone of a noblewoman hearing bad news and trying not to make a scene. Gandhari keeps her hands folded in her lap. She does not weep. That would almost make it easier for everyone. Instead, she asks whether they knew before the envoys arrived. Her father says yes. She asks why she was not told first. He does not answer as quickly. There it is, the hurt beneath the politics. Not only that, she is being sent away. Not only that the husband chosen for her lives in darkness, but that others had time to think around her future before she herself was allowed into the room. That lands deeply. For a day or two, the palace moves in a strained quiet. Preparations continue, because preparations always continue. Tailors measure. Jewelers unpack trays. Priests consult calendars. Cooks discuss travel provisions with the seriousness of generals planning a siege. Nothing halts simply because a girl's future has tilted under her feet. Gandhari walks the terraces. The mountains are blue in the distance. The road below is alive with ordinary life that has no patience for royal sorrow. Goat herds, traders, children chasing each other, women balancing baskets, dogs asleep in dangerous places, as if carts and hooves have signed a treaty with them. Shakuni finds her there more than once. He argues in turns. 1 hour he wants refusal, another hour he wants terms, another hour he wants to travel with her, remain near her, keep watch in that eastern court. He has already begun to hate Hastinapura a little, which for Shakuni is like a small coal dropped into dry grass. Not much at first, enough later. She hears him. She does not calm him so much as absorb the force of him. Then comes the last morning in Gandhara before departure. It begins like any other. That is the cruelty of such mornings. The sky is pale. The air is cold enough that your fingers want sleeves. Incense rises from the shrine room. Stable boys curse softly at a mule with opinions. A servant somewhere drops a bronze pot and the clang goes on forever. The women come with her travel garments, the fine ones, layered, royal, proper for a princess going to her marriage. Silk under wool, gold border work, veils, jewels. The fragrance of sandalwood and fresh linen fills the chamber. Attendants speak in hushed, efficient tones. One adjusts pleats, another brings the cosmetics tray, another holds up necklaces for selection. Gandhari sits before polished metal mirrors. She sees herself, not as poets see her, not as ambassadors report her, as she is, young, controlled, beautiful, yes, but more than that, alive with an intelligence that does not soften under ornament. Her eyes are steady. That is what people remember first. Steady eyes. The truth of Dhritarashtra is in the room with her now, even before anyone says his name. A husband who has never seen dawn over the hills, never seen his own hand, never seen her face. Something settles in her then, not suddenly perhaps, or perhaps very suddenly, after days of ripening in silence. She asks for a length of cloth. At first, the attendants think she means a travel veil. One brings a fine embroidered one, light enough for display. Gandhari says no. Another brings a heavier wrap. No, she asks again, more specifically, a long strip, plain, strong, enough to bind. Now the room stills. Servants understand the sound of a life changing even before the words are fully spoken. The cloth is brought. It is soft but firm, clean, smelling faintly of stored linen and the cedar chest it came from. Gandhari takes it in her hands, tests the weight, runs it once between finger and thumb. You are close enough to hear the fabric whisper. An old nurse asks what she means to do. Gandhari does not make a speech. This is not a hall, not an audience, not a performance for the court. She simply says that if the man she is to join has been given darkness, then she will share it. She will not enter his life keeping for herself what fate denied him. The servants gasp. One drops to her knees, begging her not to do this. Another begins to cry quietly in that practical way of older women who can continue adjusting hems while being heartbroken. Someone runs to fetch a senior attendant, then stops, unsure whether this is the kind of thing one interrupts royalty over. In palaces, half of power is knowing when to panic discreetly. Gandhari rises. The room tilts around the moment. Sunlight comes through the lattice and patterns her sleeves. Dust turns slowly in that beam. Her jewels are cool against her throat. You can smell lamp oil, sandalwood paste, and the sharper note of nervous sweat from the women around her. She lifts the cloth. For one heartbeat, it hovers at her brow. Then it touches skin. That first contact is small and enormous at once. Just fabric across the forehead. Just a cool strip of woven thread. Then lower, over the eyes. Darkness not yet total, because the cloth is not tied. Light still glows red through the weave. Her breath changes. Not panic, not exactly, but the body knows before the mind settles. Vision narrows. The world becomes warmth, pressure, muffled brightness. She feels one attendant's hands flutter near her shoulder and then stop. She hears another whisper, a prayer under her breath. Outside, absurdly, a cart rolls past in the courtyard, as if none of this concerns it. Gandhari draws the cloth back once, to position it properly. Then again, she covers her eyes. This time, she does not hesitate. She tells them to tie it. No one moves. So she lifts her hands behind her own head and begins the knot herself. A maid, weeping now openly, finally steps in to help. Together, they pull the strip firm. The pressure deepens. The last of the red light fades. And just like that, the world is gone. No, not gone. Changed. Utterly. You feel it with her. The first total dark. The way sound grows larger in an instant. The rustle of silk becomes architecture. Someone's breath 3 steps away sounds startlingly near. The room you knew by sight now presses in through echo, scent, memory. The floor under her bare soles feels cooler. The necklace at her throat feels heavier. Her own pulse is loud. One of the younger servants begins sobbing. Another says it cannot be undone like this, not now, not before the journey. An older nurse grips Gandhari's forearm and asks her to think once more. But Gandhari is already standing inside the choice. She turns her face toward the voices, not perfectly, not yet. She reaches once into empty air before her hand meets the carved edge of a low table. She steadies herself on it. You can almost hear her, learning the world anew in a single breath. Then she asks calmly to be led to her father. Word runs ahead of her, like fire in dry reeds. By the time she enters the outer hall, supported on one side by her nurse and on the other by a maid who has stopped crying only because she is too stunned to remember how, everyone knows. Sandals scuff. Bangles go still. Men who would happily debate border revenues for 6 hours fall silent at the sound of her approach. Her father rises. Shakuni is there too. You do not see their faces now, neither does she, but you feel the force of them in the room. Her father speaks first, shaken, asking what she has done. Gandhari answers plainly. She will share her husband's darkness. Shakuni says nothing for a long moment. You can imagine him standing rigid, jaw tight, hands useless at his sides for once. Outrage wars with awe. He knows his sister. He knows this is not whim. Once she plants her feet inwardly, whole courts have to go around her. There are arguments, gentle ones, angry ones, pleading ones. This is too much. This is noble but unnecessary. This is a wound given to yourself. This is a vow no one asked of you. She listens to all of it, then remains as she is. The departure cannot be delayed forever. So the Princess of Gandhara, who had spent her life reading faces, roads, weather, motives, and the fine tremor in a courtier's voice, walks out from her father's house with her own eyes covered. The palace steps she knew from childhood must now be counted. The sunlight on her skin means more because she no longer sees it. The wind from the hills touches her cheeks one last time as a daughter of that place. You stand there as the caravan readies. Horses snort into the cold morning. Leather creaks, wheels complain. Priests murmur blessings over grain, flame, and water. From somewhere below comes the smell of dung, dust, wool, and fresh bread. Human life in its usual mixture of holy and inconvenient. Shakuni goes with her. Of course he does. Whether from brotherly devotion, distrust of Hastinapura, or the simple fact that no one with sense would let a newly blindfolded princess mount a travel carriage alone with strangers and optimism, he goes. And Gandhari steps into the chariot by touch, hand to rail, foot to board, a pause as she judges distance, then seated. The women around her wipe their eyes. Men lower their heads. The mountain wind moves the edges of banners overhead. The caravan turns east. Behind her lie the terraces of Gandhara, the bright cold mornings, the long roads, the discipline that shaped her, the mirrors she will never use again. Ahead lies Hastinapura, a blind prince, a vast palace, a marriage born in concealment, children not yet crying, sorrows not yet named. For now, there is only motion. Wheel over stone, harness bells, the sway of the road, the cloth firm against her skin. And all day, as the mountains slowly loosen their hold and the world opens toward the plains, Gandhari keeps her face lifted into a darkness she chose herself. Not wavering, not yet regretting, only listening, only learning the road by sound, only carrying into the future that strange, terrible, magnificent stillness with which some people meet the life appointed to them. By evening, the air is warmer. The smell changes too. Less mountain cold, more open earth, tamarisk, dust, campfire smoke, boiled lentils, horses standing hip-shot in their lines. The caravan halts. Men call for water. Cooks stir pots. Someone laughs too loudly because travel makes fools of dignified people by the second day and of their digestion by the third. Under the darkening sky, attendants help Gandhari down. She stands for a moment, blindfolded, listening to the whole camp breathe. A princess no longer entirely of her father's house. A bride not yet arrived. A woman who has done something everyone will speak of for generations, though none of them can yet feel what the cloth really is against the skin after hours, after days, after years. That comes in time. For now, night gathers around the first camp on the long eastern road. The fires crackle low. The bells on the tethered animals settle one by one into silence. And under a sky she cannot see, Gandhari turns her face toward the wind from home until even that grows faint. The wheels go quiet at last. The garlands dry. The wedding smoke thins into the rafters. And once the chariots stop and the marriage fires cool, the real work begins. Learning a kingdom you will never look at directly. Hastinapura meets Gandhari first as sound, not sight, never sight. Sound. A city this old has layers to it. Outer gates that groan like tired oxen. Courtyards where sandals slap stone in quick bursts. Pigeons nesting high in beams. Water carried in bronze pots. Armored men clearing their throats as if even their throats are official property of the throne. Gandhari steps down from her chariot with the cloth over her eyes, and the whole city seems to inhale. You can feel that inhale with her. The afternoon heat presses against silk and skin. Dust clings to the hem of her garments. Somewhere close by, horses stamp and snort, hot and restless, smelling of leather, sweat, and sun-warmed mane. Oil lamps are already being lit inside, though daylight still lingers. Sandalwood smoke drifts through the entrance halls. She does not ask for anyone's arm. That matters. She stands still first, counting breath, listening. Then 1 foot forward, stone under sole, then another. The threshold is slightly raised. She feels it with her toes before the rest of her weight commits. A tiny pause, then over, inside. That is how she enters Hastinapura. Not in triumph, not in tears, by learning the ground. The palace is enormous, and almost immediately it becomes clear that whoever planned it had a deep, devotional love for polished floors and absolutely no mercy for blind people. Corridors open into wider corridors. Staircases appear where no staircase ought to be. Doorways hide behind curtains thick as winter blankets. Courtyards arrive suddenly in floods of open air and birdsong, then vanish behind carved screens and cool shadow. By the second day, Gandhari knows 3 things with perfect certainty. First, every servant in the women's quarters is trying not to hover. Second, everyone is hovering. Third, there are far too many stairs. She learns the palace in pieces. 7 steps from her sleeping chamber to the carved pillar with the lotus base. Turn left. 12 more to the wall niche where someone always leaves fresh jasmine. Another turn. A rug change underfoot means the passage toward the family shrine. Cooler air means a northern corridor. A faint draft and the smell of horses means an opening toward the royal stables. The kitchens announce themselves from very far away. Ghee, roasting grain, wet clay jars, smoke, cumin cracked in hot oil, and the quick, sharp scent of green coriander being chopped. You are there with her in those first days, moving slowly through spaces built for people who glance, assume, and keep going. She cannot glance. She cannot assume. Her world must be assembled from edges, echoes, and memory. She touches everything, not greedily, carefully. Door frames, wall carvings, the grain of cedar chests, the smooth chill of marble, the rough seam where 2 stone slabs meet, the bells tied near shrine curtains, the different handles of jars. She learns what polished bronze sounds like when a fingernail taps it. She learns what distance sounds like in a hall with a high ceiling. She learns how many servants a room can hold by how the silence behaves when she enters. And the servants learn her. The first time one maid tries to guide her too quickly around a corner, Gandhari walks straight into a low table and nearly sends a tray of betel leaves to the floor. There is a bright clatter. Someone gasps. Someone else makes a tiny strangled sound that wants very badly to be laughter and very much values continued employment. Gandhari steadies herself, touches the table, and says only that the palace seems to enjoy ambushing guests. The whole room exhales. After that, the maids stop treating her like spun glass. Not carelessly, just more honestly. That helps, because palace life is not built from ceremonies. It is built from repetitions. Bath water in the morning, hair oiled and braided, offerings made, meals timed around councils, petitions, and the moods of powerful men. Garments changed for heat, for ritual, for public audience, for private family meals. Messages arriving, messages delayed, messages that should never have been, messages spoken at all. And at the center of this new life stands her husband, Dhritarashtra. He had been a fact before, a prince, a name, a condition attached to a marriage. Now he becomes a man in a room. The first private hours between them are not grand. They are not effortlessly tender. They are not blessed with magical ease. They are awkward. Of course they are awkward. 2 royal people, married for reasons larger than themselves, both carrying pride, both carrying injury, both trying not to let the other hear too much of it. His blindness is not hers. That becomes clear at once. He moves through familiar chambers with an old confidence she does not yet have. He knows where a seat stands from memory, where a lamp hangs by the slight shift in warm air, where a servant has paused by the almost silent click of jewelry. He has lived with other people's pity for years and learned to step around it. She has chosen darkness recently. He was born into it. That difference sits between them before tenderness can. Their early conversations are slow and formal, then unexpectedly direct. He asks what Gandhara smelled like in winter. She asks whether Hastinapura always sounds this crowded. He tells her the city changes tone before rain. The market noise lowers, dogs bark more sharply, dust settles, cloth awnings begin to flap. She tells him the mountain roads near her father's house carried cold wind even in warm months, and caravans could be heard before dawn. Bells and axle creak, drifting through mist. In those exchanges, something quiet begins. Not romance first, recognition. He knows what it is to be watched before speaking. She knows what it is to arrive already discussed by others. He knows the patient insult of people praising your courage when what they mean is your limitation. She knows the sudden stiffness in a room when a woman does something no one expected and everyone must pretend they expected it all along. So they begin there, on common ground made of injury, discipline, and stubborn dignity. At night, the palace changes again. Cooler stone, lower voices, the smell of lamps thickening in enclosed spaces, incense from shrine rooms curling through the dark, far-off guards changing watch with spear butts tapping floor or courtyard brick. Sometimes they sit together after attendants leave, not saying much, listening. The Ganga is not far. On some nights, when wind turns right, you can almost imagine hearing the long, soft breath of water beyond the city. Add temple bells, add one owl, add a servant hurrying somewhere with a metal tray that trembles faintly in nervous hands. This is intimacy too, not touch yet. Shared listening, still, touch comes, cautious at first. A hand offered and found. The weight of his arm beside hers during ritual. The surprising warmth of his palm. The way he reaches for objects without fumbling, and the way she begins to map the line of his forearm, wrist, fingers, as if learning script by tracing it. He is larger than she expected. His presence fills space before he speaks. Broad-shouldered, heavy-handed, carrying strength that has had nowhere honorable to spend itself for too long. He has not been made king. That fact lives in him. It changes the air around his silences. Sometimes in public halls, when elders speak over him or around him, Gandhari hears the tightening in his jaw before anyone else does. You can feel it too, standing beside the throne dais. The assembly hall smells of old wood, perfumed oil, wool, dust shaken from banners, and the faint iron scent of weapons carried by men who are technically indoors and therefore pretend they are not threatening anyone. Bhishma's voice carries through that hall like a great bow being drawn, firm, controlled, impossible to mistake. When he enters, armor may or may not be on him, but authority always is. The old grandsire does not need sight to dominate a room either. His sandals strike with measured certainty. His white garments whisper. People shift before he even speaks. To Gandhari, he is at once protector and architect of the life she now lives. He arranged, he decided, he preserved the house of Kuru by moving people like carved pieces on a board. But he is not unkind to her. He asks after her comfort. He has rooms adjusted. He orders the servants to announce thresholds, changes in floor level, open courtyards, loose carpets, low stools, and all the small hazards palaces breed like pigeons. For 3 days, this order is obeyed beautifully. On the fourth, a young page forgets to mention a bronze footstool. Gandhari strikes it with her shin hard enough to make a sound like a temple gong struck by an angry god. Bhishma, who happens to be nearby, falls silent for one breath. Then he asks if she is hurt. She says no, but the footstool may not survive. Even he almost laughs. Almost. In Bhishma's presence, almost is as wild as things get. Vidura is different. If Bhishma enters like thunder restrained by discipline, Vidura arrives like cool water poured carefully from a clay jar. His voice is level, low, and never hurried. When he speaks, Even bad news sounds arranged neatly on a tray, so no one cuts a hand picking it up. He becomes one of the first men in Hastinapura to speak to Gandhari, as if blindness has not reduced her intelligence by even a grain. He reports court matters clearly. He names people before discussing them. He does not fill silence with pity. When he escorts her through new corridors, he describes only what matters. 4 steps down, pillar on the right, curtain ahead, turn toward open air. No fuss, no performance. She trusts him quickly. That trust matters because the palace vibrates with politics all day and half the night. Dhritarashtra sits near power, but not on its highest seat. Pandu, pale, capable, visible to the court in all the ways his elder brother is not, moves through the kingdom like a future everyone has already started rehearsing. Servants know it, ministers know it, the cooks know it, and cooks always know first. You can hear it in the way names are spoken. Prince Dhritarashtra, Prince Pandu, never equally, never accidentally. Gandhari hears the hesitation before honorifics. She notices which footsteps hurry toward which chambers. She learns which messengers are sent directly to Pandu and which are delayed, softened, or ceremonially rerouted toward her husband. That palace could teach bitterness to a saint. Dhritarashtra does not need it taught. He has long practice. Some evenings he returns from council full of a stillness more dangerous than shouting. He says little, eats little, removes jewelry as if each piece has offended him personally. When he finally speaks, the words come heavy. He tells her of decisions made elsewhere, of duties granted and then trimmed, of respect offered with the careful neatness people use when they do not intend obedience. She listens. Sometimes she answers with comfort, sometimes with sharp truth. Sometimes she says nothing, because there are hours when a wounded man does not want wisdom. He wants witness. That too, she learns. And he learns her. He learns that she counts steps under her breath when anxious. He learns that she prefers plain cotton in the hottest afternoons and heavier silk only when ceremony demands it. He learns that she can identify at least 6 regular attendants from the sound of their anklets alone. He learns that if someone rearranges her chamber without warning, she becomes very quiet, which is how Gandhari shows displeasure before the storm arrives. Once, some enthusiastic servant decides to improve the queen's room by moving a chest, a lampstand, and 2 stools. That night, Gandhari crosses the chamber, reaches for empty air where the chest used to be, turns and encounters a stool with her ankle, then another. For a brief moment, the queen of Hastinapura appears to be fighting unseen demons with perfect seriousness. Dhritarashtra hears the scuffle, rises too fast, catches the shifted lampstand with his knee, and nearly takes revenge on the entire project of interior decoration. No great harm is done, only dignity. The servants are rebuked the next morning in voices so calm that everyone feels worse than if they had been shouted at. After that, nothing in the room moves without warning. Marriage grows like that, not from grand declarations, from repeated survivals of little humiliations, from learning where the other person stores grief, from discovering which silences ask for company and which ask for distance, from reaching in darkness and finding the hand expected. The seasons turn. Summer settles over the palace like a hot brass lid. The stone floors stay cool only until midday. After that, even the walls seem to breathe warmth. Fans of woven palm move constantly in the women's quarters. The scent of vetiver mats, dampened with water, rises from windows. Mangoes appear, so do tempers. Then the monsoon breaks. First dust scent, then wind, then rain hammering courtyards, roofs, carved railings, steps, and garden pools, until the whole palace sounds like 1,000 drummers practicing at once. Gandhari stands beneath a covered veranda and tilts her face toward the spray. You stand there with her. The air goes cold against your skin after weeks of heat. Wet earth rises sweet and heavy from the courtyards. Peacocks cry somewhere beyond the inner walls. Servants rush to rescue cushions, laundry, scrolls, and one extremely offended cat. Dhritarashtra comes to stand beside her, and for a while they say nothing at all. Then he tells her this is the sound he loved as a child, because no one could tell, in such weather, who looked where. Rain made everybody equal for a little while. She turns her face toward him. That is nearly a smile. Not every tenderness in their marriage is gentle. Some come edged with sorrow. The court waits for heirs. Always that waiting. Women in palaces are never left alone inside time. Every month is counted by someone. Every ritual bath observed. Every whispered prayer weighed against the shape of a household's ambition. Older women bring blessings scented with turmeric and warm milk. Priests murmur auspicious hymns. Attendants study Gandhari's appetite as if mango cravings might determine the future of a dynasty. She feels the pressure without needing anyone to name it. A queen must bear sons. A blind prince without sons is vulnerable. A blind prince with sons becomes a line impossible to ignore. So the palace watches her body as kingdoms watch monsoon clouds. There is loneliness in that. Even surrounded by attendants, a queen can be lonely, especially then. Kunti enters this world later, but her presence, once there, alters the current immediately. She is not noisy. She is not foolish. She does not waste words. By the time Gandhari comes to know her well, she has already gathered herself into that composed strength women build when life has asked too much too early and then asked again. Their relationship is not simple. How could it be? They are tied to the same house from different doors. Each knows the other matters. Each understands that affection inside a royal family must learn to breathe alongside comparison. And yet, there are moments of real warmth. Kunti visits in quieter hours when formalities have loosened. The women exchange oils and remedies. They speak of fasting days, difficult servants, stubborn priests, and the exhaustion of wearing jewels heavy enough to qualify as military equipment. Once, during a long ritual afternoon in unbearable heat, one of them remarks that the men of the Kuru house seem convinced kingship is forged from vows, weapons, and speeches, while the women know perfectly well it is held together by remembering everyone's meal preferences. That one earns an actual laugh, not loud, but real. You hear silk shift as they lean closer. You smell cardamom from cooling drinks set nearby in silver cups beaded with moisture. A fly buzzes. Someone swats at it and misses. Royal dignity survives. Barely. Still, beneath such moments runs the harder current. Pandu's future, Dhritarashtra's exclusion, Bhishma's oversight, the old machinery of succession always turning. Gandhari learns the palace by touch, yes, but also by tone. The clipped impatience of nobles who think lineage solves everything. The fluttering devotion of those who serve power before knowing where it will settle. The caution in Vidura's voice when he brings difficult news. The deepening restlessness in Dhritarashtra when another public duty is given to his younger brother. Sometimes Gandhari walks the inner corridors at dusk with one trusted maid a few steps behind. The palace cools then. Lamps bloom one by one. Incense burns in niches. Evening prayers drift from shrines. Somewhere boys are practicing with wooden weapons in a courtyard. All shouts and whacks and offended pride. She counts as she walks. 16 to the turning, 9 to the open court, 3 to the pillar. Pause. She places her hand on warm stone, still holding the day's heat. This is how she steadies herself. By then, she knows the palace well enough to move with confidence. And confidence changes how others behave around her. They stop expecting fragility. They begin making room. That is no small victory. In the women's wing, she can tell which chamber belongs to which lady by scent alone. One favors jasmine, another champaka. Another burns too much frankincense and has likely not yet been told. In one room, the floors are always cool because water jars stand there. In another, the air tastes faintly of old manuscripts and camphor because someone prays more than she sleeps. In the public halls, she learns the difference between ceremonial silence and dangerous silence. Ceremonial silence is arranged, symmetrical, full of cloth, rustling and waiting. Dangerous silence has weight. People forget to shift, anklets stop, even oil in lamps seems to listen. When that silence falls around her husband, she pays attention. Dhritarashtra, for all his pride and thwarted longing, is not without gentleness. He can be unexpectedly patient with frightened servants. He remembers voices, and people love being remembered. He knows music deeply. Lute, drum, chant, flute, carried over water at festival time. He hears structure where others hear pleasure. Some nights, musicians perform in the inner chambers, and Gandhari sits beside him while he identifies ragas by their opening curves of sound. You sit with them. The room glows orange with lamps through fabric shades. The smell is sesame oil, lotus paste, and fresh cotton. Outside, the city has softened. Inside, a veena begins, low and golden as evening itself. His head tilts slightly. He knows this one. He tells her how the melody should descend, where it will linger, when the drum will answer, and it does. She listens to the music, and to him listening. That is another kind of closeness. There are harder nights too. Nights when ambition prowls the corridors like a cat that has discovered cream. Nights when relatives from distant branches arrive with gifts and hidden calculations. Nights when Bhishma and ministers confer long after moonrise. Nights when Dhritarashtra cannot sleep and turns restlessly on linen sheets while lamps burn low and the scent of extinguished wicks hangs in the room. On such nights, Gandhari sometimes rises and walks barefoot over the cool stone. He asks where she is going. She says nowhere, just learning the dark better. And because he understands the strange comfort in that, he does not stop her. By the time months have deepened into years, Hastinapura no longer feels like an enemy built from corridors. It feels like a living beast she has learned to ride. She knows where it breathes, where it bites, where it pretends to sleep. She knows the hour the kitchen fires are banked down. She knows the exact hollow echo outside the old treasury wall. She knows Bhishma's approach from any distance. She knows Vidura by the pause before he enters, polite even when burdened. She knows Kunti's bracelets, lighter than most queens, practical enough to tell you something of her before she says a word. And she knows her husband's moods by the way he sets down his signet ring. You could place her in darkness anywhere in that palace now, and she would still find her way to the shrine, to the inner garden, to her chamber, to his side. That is the real beginning of her reign. Not the wedding fire, not the blindfold. This, the slow making of mastery inside limitation. The discipline of turning strangeness into habit. The building of marriage not from illusion, but from repeated choice. To stay, to listen, to learn, to keep walking. And all the while, the palace goes on humming around them, full of silk and secrets, conscience and counsel, sandalwood and rivalry, babies yet unborn, and griefs not yet named. For now, evening settles softly over Hastinapura. Servants lower lamp wicks, the last parrots quarrel in the courtyard trees, and then grow still. From the kitchens comes the fading fragrance of rice, warm milk, and clarified butter. Rainwater drips from carved eaves into stone basins below. In the royal chambers, a queen who chose darkness moves through familiar space without fear. A king born to darkness waits as she comes near. Their hands find each other in the quiet, and the vast palace, with all its stairs and schemes and listening walls, breathes around them like something old, wakeful, and not yet finished. But in a royal house, footsteps are counted by one question above all others. When will the children come? At first, the waiting seems ordinary. A month passes, then another. The palace women begin speaking more softly when Gandhari enters. Priests adjust their shawls and say auspicious things in carefully measured tones. Old nurses bring warm milk scented with saffron and crushed almonds. Somewhere, always, incense is burning. Sandalwood in the morning, resin at dusk, ghee lamps through the night. The whole palace leans toward her body. You can feel it in the corridors, the expectation. The way even servants carrying laundry walk a little more carefully near the queen's chambers, as if a future king might already be listening from the dark. Gandhari bears it with her usual stillness. She has already done one impossible thing. She has crossed from Gandhara into Kuru power, wrapped darkness around her own eyes, and learned an enormous palace by touch and memory. She can count the turnings from her bedchamber to the inner shrine better than most sighted people. She knows Dhritarashtra's mood by the way his hand finds the carved edge of a chair. She knows Bhishma's arrival from the weight of silence that walks ahead of him. Now she is asked for another miracle, a son, not affection, not wisdom, not grace under strain, a son first. Then, if the gods are generous, more sons after. Dhritarashtra does not say this cruelly. That is part of the trouble. He wants heirs with the hunger of a man who has always stood near a throne and never fully rested in it. In the privacy of their chambers, with the night thick and warm and the oil lamps burning low, his hands sometimes search for hers with unusual tenderness. He speaks of the future then, of sons learning the bow, of boys racing in courtyards, of the line of Kuru extending through them. Gandhari listens. Sometimes she leans into those dreams. Sometimes she lies awake after he sleeps and listens to the palace breathe around her. Huge places never truly sleep, water somewhere in a stone cistern. The scrape of a guard's spear on the courtyard flagstones, a horse stamping in the royal stables, wind pressing against latticed windows and moving through the corridors with the soft voice of someone who knows every secret in the house. The seasons turn. Heat comes first, heavy and close. Cotton sticks to skin. The blindfold gathers warmth around her brow. Then the rains arrive, merciful and wild, drumming on roofs and washing the dust from Hastinapura's walls. The smell of wet earth rises rich and dark from the courtyards. Frogs begin their ridiculous chorus as if they personally arranged the monsoon. Still no child. Then at last, signs. The old women smile with real confidence now. The physicians place cool fingers on her wrist and nod in satisfaction. Offerings multiply. The chamber fills with flowers. Jasmine one day, champaka the next, marigolds in thick orange ropes. Rice is blessed. Mantras are chanted. Dhritarashtra's relief is so palpable, it almost has weight. He's going to be a father. Gandhari is calm when they tell her what everyone already suspects. She places her palm over her abdomen and feels not movement yet, but possibility. The palace exhales. Months pass, then more months. Her pregnancy lengthens strangely. At first, no one calls it strange. In a royal house, bad news puts on slippers and walks very slowly. The older attendants murmur that some children are merely taking their time. Priests suggest stronger rites. Physicians change tonics. Clarified butter infused with herbs. Rice gruel. Sweet pomegranate juice. Decoctions that smell bitter enough to frighten evil spirits, or at least anyone with working taste buds. Gandhari drinks them all. The child does not come. Her body grows heavy. Then heavier still. Her back aches. Sleep becomes a negotiation, not a gift. She turns from one side to the other and feels as though she is carrying a sealed clay jar under her ribs. Her ankles swell. Her breath shortens in the hotter hours. The blindfold, once chosen like armor, now sometimes feels like one burden too many. You are there in the chamber at noon, when the heat is thick and the air barely moves. The sheets smell of sun-dried cotton and medicinal oil. Outside, peacocks cry with that strange sound that always makes it seem as though someone rich is having a dramatic crisis in a garden. Inside, Gandhari sits propped against cushions, one hand at the small of her back, the other resting on the life that refuses to arrive. The women tell her to be patient. Patience. That word again. She has been patient crossing kingdoms, patient in marriage, patient in court, patient in silence, patient in darkness. Now patience begins to taste like dust. The whispers change. Not in front of her, never in front of her, but palaces are built from stone, and stone loves echoing what should have stayed hidden. A maid tells another maid. A guard hears two physicians speaking in low voices beyond a screen. A nurse from the women's wing carries gossip tucked into her breath like contraband. Kunti has borne a child. The news reaches Gandhari not as a formal announcement, but as a tremor in the room. She knows before anyone says it plainly. She hears the hesitation in a servant's breathing. She hears the false brightness in an attendant's voice. At last, one trusted woman tells her gently, Kunti, living away in the forest with Pandu, has given birth. A son, healthy, strong, blessed, Yudhishthira. The name travels through the palace like oil spreading across water. Gandhari sits very still while it lands. Kunti, who was not in the great capital. Kunti, who did not command the old throne room. Kunti, whose husband had gone from power into exile and forest life. Kunti now has the first son. First matters in royal houses. First is not just first. First is claim. First is shadow. First is the beginning of arguments men will pretend are about law while meaning inheritance all along. Dhritarashtra says comforting things. He insists their own child will come. He speaks of fortune not being measured in one birth. He tries, truly tries, to soothe what cannot be soothed by reason. Gandhari listens, and under the folds of cloth covering her eyes, Darkness grows hot. Another month passes, then another. The child still does not come. Her body becomes a prison of waiting, not the living, fluttering waiting of a child eager for the world. No, this is a still waiting, dense, ominous, like a monsoon cloud that gathers and never breaks. The women massage her limbs with warm sesame oil. Priests chant over water and sprinkle it around her bed. Sacred smoke curls through the room. Vyasa's earlier blessing is remembered and repeated because once, long ago, he had granted her a boon. She would have 100 sons. 100. The palace had treasured those words. Now they begin to sound less like blessing and more like a promise from far away, too large to hold in ordinary hands. Gandhari's frustration turns inward first, then outward, then into something more dangerous than either. One day the chamber is heavy, with late afternoon heat. No breeze. The lamps have not yet been lit, and the room hangs in that uneasy hour when shadows lengthen and tempers shorten. The smell is thick, old flowers, hot stone, medicinal ghee, her own exhausted skin. Somewhere nearby, someone is grinding herbs with a pestle. Stone against stone, stone against stone. It sounds like irritation made audible. Again, the whispers reach her. Again, Kunti's son is spoken of. Again, someone mentions omens favoring the firstborn. It is too much. Gandhari, who has endured so much by holding herself tighter and tighter, suddenly breaks the pattern she has made her life. In anguish, she strikes her own womb. Not with ritual, not with thought, with despair. The room erupts, servants gasp, bangles clash. Someone tries to catch her hands. Someone else begins praying immediately, which is what people do when they have no practical idea what to do but still want credit for effort. Gandhari doubles forward, breath gone sharp. Pain tears through her lower body, deep and terrible. And then it comes. Not a child, not the wet, squalling beginning everyone expected. A hard, lifeless mass, a lump of flesh, heavy and silent, fallen from months upon months of waiting. The room freezes around it. No one knows what to call it. No one wants to touch it first. The scented smoke from the shrine drifts in and mixes with the raw smell of birth and hot cloth and fear. Somewhere outside the chamber, oblivious birds continue making evening noises, which feels almost insulting. You can feel the silence. This is the kind of silence that makes even silk seem loud. Gandhari hears it, feels it, knows at once from the absence of a cry what has happened. Her hands search. An attendant tries to stop her, then cannot. She touches the thing that has come from her body and recoils, not from disgust alone, but from the collapse of hope into something shapeless. So long, so much pain, so much waiting. And this, she does not weep immediately. The grief is too stunned for tears at first. Dhritarashtra is called, priests are called, physicians are called. Everyone is called, because a royal disaster draws people faster than a royal festival. Feet rush along corridors, orders fly, water is heated, cloth is changed. Lamps are lit in haste. Their flames shake in the draught made by too many bodies moving at once. Then someone says the one name that stills the room, Vyasa. The sage comes. He does not arrive like courtmen arrive, announced by title and escort. He appears with the quiet certainty of weather. The air changes around him. Even those who are not devout stand straighter. He smells of forest smoke, wild earth, and long travel, as though he belongs more to riverbanks and hermit groves than to polished palace floors. He enters the chamber and asks to hear everything. Gandhari tells him, Not every detail. She does not need to. He understands the ache before she finishes. Her voice is hoarse from strain. She reminds him of the blessing he once gave her. She had trusted it. She had carried that promise like a hidden lamp through difficult days. Now this dreadful, silent mass lies where a child should be. Vyasa does not startle. That almost startles everyone else. He tells them the boon has not failed. The attendants exchange uneasy glances. A statement like that is difficult to square with what sits cooling on a cloth before them. But the sage remains calm, unsettlingly calm. He instructs them to bring water, cool water. He asks for jars, many jars, 101, clean, prepared, strong enough to hold life before life knows its own shape. He orders them to be filled with ghee. Now the palace truly begins to bustle. Servants run. You would laugh if the room were not so tense at how quickly a royal household can transform from sacred horror into organized storage problem. 1 minute, everyone is frozen in existential dread. The next, somebody is shouting about jar sizes. Another is demanding more clarified butter. A third has discovered that counting to 101 under pressure is much harder than it sounds. The ghee arrives in great vessels, warm and fragrant. Jars are fetched and washed and arranged. Potters are woken. Storerooms are opened. The women's wing fills with the smell of milk fat, oil lamps, damp clay, and confusion. Rows of jars begin to line the chamber and the adjoining room. 1, 10, 20, 50, 101. Their pale gleaming mouths wait in lamplight. Vyasa has the mass of flesh sprinkled with cool water. Then, with a steadiness that makes everyone hold their breath, he directs that it be divided, not hacked in horror, not discarded, divided with intention, piece by piece, into portions the size of a thumb. 100 pieces, and then one more, for a daughter also. The work is careful, ritual-like, strange beyond any ordinary understanding of birth. Attendants bring cloths, bowls, water. Priests murmur mantras under their breath. The flames of the ghee lamps throw golden light across the sage's hands. Outside, night settles over Hastinapura. The city continues breathing, unaware that, in one chamber, the future of a dynasty has been turned into a row of sealed vessels. Each piece is placed into a jar of ghee. Each jar is covered. Each is to be kept hidden, guarded, tended. Vyasa instructs that they remain undisturbed for the proper time. Only then will the children emerge. The chamber, which had been a place of despair, becomes something else entirely. A waiting room of miracles. A nursery, not yet a nursery. A place where mothers and nurses move between reverence and alarm every few breaths. Gandhari, exhausted nearly past speech, asks whether this can be true. Vyasa tells her it will be. He blesses the jars. Then he goes. That is his way. He arrives when the world cracks open, says what must be done, and leaves everyone else to live inside the consequences. The days that follow are unlike anything the palace has known. The jars are kept in a protected chamber, warm and watched. Women enter softly. Lamps are trimmed. Mantras are recited. Ghee is checked. Seals are inspected. No one says it aloud, but everyone is a little afraid of the room. It smells rich and faintly sweet, with that buttery heaviness of clarified fat and clay and warm enclosed air. Even the most practical servants lower their voices there. Gandhari visits often. She cannot see the rows before her, but she knows their order. She reaches out and touches one cool curved surface. Then another, clay, smooth beneath her fingers. Behind each wall, perhaps a sun, or perhaps hope, arranged in jars to make grief tolerable. Dhritarashtra comes too. He places his palm against the vessels and stands in silence. It is one of the rare times husband and wife share bewilderment without argument. What can either of them say? Their children are not in cradles. Their heirs are maturing in pots of ghee like some royal recipe only the gods would dare invent. The palace waits. Weeks pass. The chamber grows almost holy through repetition. Nurses whisper, priests chant, servants deliver fresh flowers to the threshold. The smell of lotus and jasmine battles politely with the richer scent of ghee and warm clay. Then, one day, the first jar opens. It happens with ceremony and panic at once. Attendants gather. Gandhari is seated close. Dhritarashtra is there, his hand gripping the arm of his chair, hard enough to whiten the knuckles. Priests murmur blessings. Someone nearby is definitely on the verge of fainting from nerves, but refuses to ruin such an important occasion by doing it too early. The seal is removed. From the first jar emerges a child, a boy, small, slick with life, crying at once as if he has arrived annoyed by the delay. The room erupts in sound, relief first, astonishment second. The women laugh and weep. Priests bless the gods. Dhritarashtra inhales sharply, a sound that is almost a sob. Gandhari reaches forward with trembling hands, and the child is placed against her, warm, real, wriggling, alive. After so long, after darkness, pain, shame, waiting, silence, jars, ghee, prayer, and fear, alive. She touches his face, his tiny mouth, the soft skull, the restless limbs, her first son, Duryodhana. And then the omens begin. From outside the city walls comes the harsh cry of jackals. Wind rises suddenly, though the night had been still. Lamps flicker, horses stamp in the stables, donkeys bray, birds startle from sleep. The air itself seems to shiver. The priests look at one another in quick alarm. Men learned in signs feel cold along their necks. The child cries louder, not sickly, strong. Too strong, perhaps, for the comfort of those listening for patterns in the dark. The wise men are troubled. They speak carefully, because this is still a royal birth chamber, and nobody wants to be the person who brings doom into a room where a mother is holding her first living child. But their unease grows. The signs are not good. They know what old omens sound like. They know how certain births arrive with blessing and others with warning. One of them, after much hesitation, says what others fear to say. This child may bring ruin. The counsel that follows is terrible in its plainness. Better, they suggest, to let go of one for the safety of many. Better to cast away the source of coming destruction before it roots itself in the house. Even Dhritarashtra is shaken. But Gandhari, no. No priest, however learned, is taking this child from her. You are close enough to feel the heat in the room when she gathers Duryodhana to her breast and refuses. She has carried emptiness too long. She has endured whispers too long. She has touched the shape of her own despair on a cloth-strewn bed. She has sat beside 100 sealed jars while the whole palace breathed doubt around her. Now at last, a son is warm in her arms, and men with polished voices want to speak of necessity. She will not hear it. Her refusal is absolute. If the omens bark, let them bark. If jackals call, let them call. If the wind complains in the eaves, it may complain to someone else. This son is hers. Dhritarashtra, already loving the child with the fierce relief of a long-denied father, does not press the matter. Whatever uncertainty touched him drains before the fact of warm infant flesh, tiny fists, and the intoxicating nearness of succession at last. So Duryodhana remains, and after him, one by one, the others come. The jars are opened in turn, day after day, or in careful sequence as the chamber can bear it. More children emerge. Boys, boys, boys. So many that the nurses begin to live in a permanent state, somewhere between devotion and logistical collapse. Every time one more child cries, another maid is sent running for linens. Another wet nurse is summoned. Another cradle must be found. Another astrologer must be fed before he faints dramatically onto the horoscope scrolls. The nursery grows crowded very quickly. What had been eerie becomes bustling. Tiny bracelets, soft cotton wraps, warm milk, cradle songs in low voices, attendants crossing and recrossing the floor like ants serving a very demanding queen bee. And then, at last, the final jar gives the extra gift Vyasa promised. A daughter, Duhshala, one girl among the flood of sons. Gandhari receives her with equal tenderness. The daughter is not less beloved for arriving last. If anything, there is a sweetness around Duhshala from the beginning, a softer current running through the storm of brothers. Still, it is the sons who make the palace ring. Soon, the women's wing sounds like a small kingdom of infants, crying from one room, hiccuping from another, wet nurses crooning, bangles clinking, children fussing in relays as if they have secretly agreed, never all, to sleep at once. You have not known exhaustion until you have tried to keep track of 100 princes. 100. Even the scribes begin to look insulted by the paperwork. Naming them is a labor. Feeding them, a campaign. Keeping them from being confused with one another before their personalities settle in. Nearly impossible. Servants invent tiny distinctions. This one's cry rises at the end. That one kicks like a colt. Another hates cold water. Another sleeps only if rocked, left to right, never right to left. Because apparently royal infants can develop opinions before they can focus. There is laughter now in Gandhari's chambers. Real laughter. A baby sneezes and startles himself into offended silence. One nurse, half asleep, almost hands the wrong prince to the wrong wet nurse and is corrected by 3 others with the urgency of women preventing international crisis. Dhritarashtra enters once and stands helplessly amid so much infant noise that even he, king though he is, has the expression of a man ambushed by destiny in very small swaddling cloths. Gandhari laughs then. She cannot help it. For a little while, the strange beginning fades beneath the ordinary tenderness of motherhood. Her hands learn each face by touch. Forehead, cheek, tiny ear, the soft fuzz of infant hair. She knows which babies settle at her voice and which prefer motion. She knows Duryodhana's cry first among all of them. Strong lungs, strong temper. Even before language, he objects to waiting. At night, the nursery glows with low lamps. The smell is milk, warm cloth, sesame oil, faint smoke, and the sweet-sour exhaustion of too many babies in one place. Outside, moonlight lies silver over palace terraces. Inside, 100 futures breathe in sleep. And yet, even in that tenderness, unease does not vanish. The omens around Duryodhana are remembered. Vidura hears of them. Bhishma hears of them. Whispers travel, not openly, not where the queen can hear. But such things never remain entirely hidden. Gandhari catches fragments, a halted sentence, a servant going suddenly silent when she enters, a priest who blesses Duryodhana with impeccable formality and then lingers a shade too long before leaving. She knows what was advised. She remembers every word. cast him away, as if children are broken vessels, as if mothers are empty courtyards where decisions may be made cleanly. No, her love hardens around him precisely because he was threatened first. This is how fate enters houses sometimes, not only through grand vows and battles and kings on chariots. Sometimes it enters through a mother pulling her child closer because the world flinched at him. Duryodhana grows. So do the others. The nursery becomes a boy's wing. The boy's wing becomes a storm. Crawling turns to running. Running turns to wrestling. The air changes from milk and lullabies to dust, sweat, smashed toys, spilled grain, and the unmistakable smell of trouble made by children with rank. But that comes in time. For now, stay here. In the first season after their births, in the softer hours. Gandhari sits on cushions while nurses move in and out like tides. Her blindfold rests cool across her brow. In her lap, one child sleeps. Near her right hand, another fusses until she touches his foot. Beyond that, in rows and clusters, the impossible family she was promised breathes around her. You can hear the little sounds. A baby sighing, a cradle rope creaking, oil in a lamp making that tiny bright hiss. Someone in the hallway whispering for more cloths. Someone else laughing so hard she has to muffle it in her veil because one of the princes has just managed to urinate on an astrologer. An astrologer. There are some victories too pure for poetry. Gandhari rests her palm over Duryodhana's chest and feels the quick, steady beat. Outside, perhaps, jackals still call beyond the city walls. Outside, perhaps, the night wind moves strangely over Hastinapura's towers. But inside, a mother holds her son and refuses the shape of any future that asks her to love him less. The lamps burn low. The jars are empty now. The cradles are full. And in the deep, royal night, beneath carved beams and painted ceilings, while incense thins into the dark and the palace settles around them, the firstborn prince of the Kuru house sleeps in Gandhari's arms, warm, breathing, claimed. Whatever the omen said, he is here. Whatever the wise feared, he is here. And she, who chose darkness long ago with steady hands, bends over the child she would not surrender, listening to him breathe, listening already for the sound of the world coming toward them. Children become princes faster than anyone expects, and soon the nursery noise hardens into the sound of rivalry. At first, it is easy to pretend otherwise. In the courtyards, boys still run too fast on polished stone and skid where they should have stopped. Tutors still clap for attention. Nurses still complain that royal children can stain silk faster than ordinary children stain cotton, which is impressive in its own useless way. But the voices change. Bhima's grows first. It comes through the halls like a monsoon drum, full of appetite, laughter, challenge. You hear him from 3 courtyards away, usually before anyone else does. Then Duryodhana's answers it, lower and tighter, sharpened by pride. One voice rolling forward like a river in flood, the other bracing against it like a wall that refuses to move. Gandhari hears all of this. She knows her sons by footfall now, knows the scrape of Duryodhana's impatience, the heavier, cheerful thunder of Dushasana, the quieter movements of the others who live in the shadow of the eldest. She knows when Bhima has entered a room because cups shake. She knows when Yudhishthira has arrived because even servants breathe a little more carefully. And Arjuna moves like a drawn bowstring, clean, controlled, dangerous in a way that hardly makes any noise at all. The palace smells of sesame oil warm milk, lamp soot, wet stone after washing. Somewhere sandalwood burns before a household shrine. Somewhere boys are fighting over nothing and everything. You are beside her in those long corridors where every echo brings news before news has been announced. The old men try to call it training. Bhishma speaks of discipline. Drona speaks of skill. Kripa speaks of standards and lineage and practice at dawn. The words are tidy, the sounds are not. One afternoon comes back again and again in memory. The princes are older then, no longer children, not yet fully men. Weapons practice has ended. Sweat and dust cling to the air. The smell of horses hangs thick from the training ground. Servants bring cool water in bronze pitchers, and the metal sweats in the heat. Then Bhima laughs, not kindly. He has thrown Duryodhana again, hard enough to bruise pride, not bones. The watching boys make the little noises boys always make when one of them has lost before an audience. Half sympathy, half delight, entirely unbearable. Duryodhana says nothing then. That is what makes it dangerous. Gandhari does not see his face, but she feels the silence around him like a tightened thread. She calls for him later. He comes with anger folded neatly under obedience, the way a prince must. He tells her Bhima is arrogant. He says the sons of Kunti think strength gives them the right to everything. He says no one stops them, no one corrects them. Everyone smiles when Bhima humiliates his cousins. She listens. What else can a mother do in the beginning but listen and hope that listening may loosen the knot? She tells him pride is dry grass. One spark and the whole field goes. She tells him he must master himself before he thinks of mastering a kingdom. She tells him the sons of Pandu are his own blood. He bows, he leaves, the knot remains. Not long after, another sound enters the palace and never really leaves. Dice, soft, knucklebone light, a little hard clicking from Shakuni's hand, from his palm to the board, from the board to the table edge, and back again. A harmless sound, if you're foolish. A small sound, domestic almost, like someone shelling nuts in the afternoon. But in Hastinapura, by then, even small sounds have teeth. Shakuni drifts in and out of Duryodhana's chambers like incense you did not ask for. He brings stories. He brings laughter too smooth to trust. He brings grievances and polishes them until they shine. When he walks through the palace, his garments whisper over the floor. He smells of travel dust, cardamom, and that faint sharp oil gamblers use on their hands. He loves Duryodhana in the way some men love a fire. Warm yourself at it. Feed it. Admire the color. Do not ask what else it might consume. Years move. The princes become men with allies, ambitions, and old resentments that no longer fit inside the schoolyard. The city itself seems to feel it. Conch calls from the guard towers sound more formal. Messengers come at stranger hours. Horses arrive lathered from hard roads. In the kitchens, women lower their voices when royal names are spoken. Then comes the whisper of wax. Not the sweet, clean wax of temple lamps. This is heavier, thick, resinous, oily in the back of the throat. The house at Varanavata is being built, and the word travels before the walls are done. A festive residence, people call it. A beautiful retreat. Lak, ghee, oils, dry timber, all packed neatly into elegance. Too neatly. Even before the open news reaches her, Gandhari feels the palace becomes slippery with caution. Servants pause when she enters. Vidura's voice grows flatter, which in him means danger. Dhritarashtra speaks too carefully. Duryodhana speaks too little. You can smell unease in a palace. though no one mentions that. It smells like hot cloth, stale lamp smoke, men who have not slept, and garlands left too long in bronze bowls. Gandhari asks questions. No one lies directly. That would require more courage than most of them possess. They move around the truth as around a pillar in the dark. A festival, an invitation, a pleasant residence, a chance for the sons of Pandu to enjoy the provinces. Nothing unusual, nothing unusual. In a royal house, that phrase means you should be very worried. She sends for Duryodhana. He comes at last. He tells her the Pandavas have gone gladly enough. They are beloved everywhere, he says, and should learn that princes cannot cling forever to one city. Too many people compare Yudhishthira to kings of old, and it is time for distance. His voice is smooth, too smooth. She asks whether harm is intended. For a breath, only a breath, he says nothing. That silence is answer enough. She tells him to stop now, while stopping is still possible. She tells him a road once taken does not end where you choose. She tells him envy is a servant that becomes master before you notice. He grows cold. Says the sons of Pandu are not harmless boys. Says they stand between him and what should be his. Says everyone in the court loves their virtues and forgets his rights. Gandhari reaches for his hand. He lets her find it, but he does not soften. That is the hardest part. Not the shouting, not the oaths, the quiet resistance of a son whose fingers have learned how to slip from his mother's grasp. Then news comes in the night. The house has burned. The air in the palace changes all at once. Even indoors, you almost smell smoke. Messengers arrive with dry throats and ash in their hair. Women begin to cry in side chambers. Men speak loudly at first, then not at all. Dhritarashtra groans like a tree splitting in wind. Ritual arrangements begin. Mourning cloth is brought out. Priests are summoned. The sons of Pandu, they say, are gone. Kunti with them, burned in the house. Gandhari sits very still, because grief, when real, can become as heavy as stone, and because part of her does not believe it. She knows her brother's softness when it turns cunning. She knows her son's hunger. She knows Vidura's silences. Too many people are grieving too quickly, as if they had rehearsed. Still, the rites begin. The palace fills with the smell of kusha grass, clarified butter, and damp clay from funerary vessels. Incense rises in blue threads. Somewhere, a woman keens until her voice breaks. Somewhere else, someone is already calculating what this changes. That is court life. Tears in one room, arithmetic in the next. Not long after, the dead return. Not literally. That would have been simpler. They reappear in rumor first, then in certainty. The sons of Pandu live. They escaped. They have wandered disguised. They have survived. And now, they are allied with Panchala. This is how news enters Hastinapura now, not as a straight road, but as a storm front. By the time the full word arrives, it carries another name with it. Draupadi. Born of fire, they say, dark, radiant, difficult to ignore, bride of the Pandavas. Then, to everyone's amazement and endless corridor gossip, bride of all five. For several days, the palace cannot discuss anything else. Even grief takes a brief step aside for this one. 5 husbands, 1 queen, a mother's accidental command made binding, priests muttering, old women pretending shock while being thrilled down to their anklets. You can almost hear the servants enjoying themselves as they pass trays and repeat the tale. Hastinapura has discovered something more irresistible than scandal. Holy scandal. Gandhari hears the name again and again. Draupadi, Panchali, Krishna, the woman with fire in her birth and fire in her speech. When the Pandavas return in strength, allied and no longer vulnerable, the court receives them with embraces that smell of perfume and caution. Silk rustles, gold ornaments clink at wrists and throats. Bhishma's blessing fills the hall like old iron. Vidura sounds relieved for the first time in months. Dhritarashtra, shaken by how close disaster came, gives them a share of the kingdom. So they go, they take wilderness and make a city. Indraprastha rises from rough land, like a thought too bright to suppress. Roads laid out, gardens planted, water channels cut, halls built with impossible craft, trade flowing in, horses, elephants, grain, perfumes, carved wood, northern wool, southern gems. The city gathers, praise the way silk gathers scent. And every scrap of praise travels back to Hastinapura. Badly, Duryodhana begins speaking of their prosperity with a calmness so controlled it chills the room. Karna stands with him more and more often now. Karna, whose voice carries heat even when low. Karna, all sharp loyalty and wounded grandeur. He is dangerous, not because he flatters Duryodhana, but because he does not need to. He believes in him. That is always stronger. When Karna comes, the air changes. You hear his armor before you hear his words, the faint metallic brush at shoulder and wrist. He smells of leather, sun-heated metal, and the dust of training grounds. He speaks as a man who has been denied too often and will not step back now. Duryodhana leans toward that certainty, as if toward warmth in winter. Shakuni is there too, of course, always somehow seated before anyone notices he has entered. Always with those dice, click, pause, click. Meanwhile, the Pandavas flourish. Arjuna's name spreads through kingdoms. Bhima's strength becomes campfire talk from one border to another. Yudhishthira gains the kind of reputation that makes other kings nervous, too righteous to dismiss, too fortunate to ignore. Then comes the great sacrifice. Kings gather, tributaries bend, honor is offered, and when Duryodhana visits that glittering hall in Indraprastha, the one built with craft so strange it makes water look like marble, and marble look like water, he returns changed. People try not to laugh in front of him. Some fail. He mistakes a floor for a pool, lifts his garments for dry crystal, then steps straight into actual water where polished stone had seemed to shine. Courtiers gasp. Attendants rush. Somewhere silk slaps wetly against his legs. Somewhere laughter escapes before it can be caught. A small thing, perhaps. There are no small things left. He returns to Hastinapura, carrying humiliation like a hot coal. Gandhari knows it before he speaks. She hears it in the clipped force of his breathing, in the way he dismisses servants too sharply, in the long silence before words finally come. He tells her the Pandavas have everything. He tells her the world now bows to Yudhishthira. He tells her he would rather burn than watch them prosper. That last word lingers, burn. Too much in this family burns. She tells him humiliation passes if you let it. She tells him envy fed daily becomes a household god no one can dismiss. She tells him to look to his own duties, his own virtues, his own restraint. But Duryodhana is no longer a boy wanting comfort after a bruise. He is a prince with grievance, allies, and an uncle who can hear desire in the smallest crack of silence. Shakuni proposes the game, not a war, not open seizure. A game, just dice, just invitation, just courtesy. Just men seated in an assembly hall under carved beams and sacred emblems, while destiny pretends to wear jewelry and smile politely. Gandhari hears of it before it happens, Of course she does. Palaces are built of stone, and rumor, she goes to Dhritarashtra. His chamber smells of medicated oils and old sandalwood. A lamp hisses softly. Fine cotton shifts as he turns toward her. He already knows why she has come. That is the weary thing. She tells him not to permit it. She reminds him of Yudhishthira's weakness for dice, reminds him of Shakuni's hands, reminds him that games among kin are never only games when inheritance sits in the room like an armed guard. She says disaster has come close enough already. Dhritarashtra sighs. He speaks of custom, of princely invitation, of not offending Duryodhana further, of perhaps, a friendly match may release tension. Friendly. That word, too, means nothing now. She presses harder, says he is king, says a father who cannot restrain a son, teaches the whole kingdom how to fall apart. Says there are moments after which no repair holds. He listens, he does not act. That has become his art. So the day comes. The assembly hall is dressed in grandeur, because men often prepare most beautifully for their worst decisions. Floors swept, lamps trimmed, garlands fresh. The smell of lotus paste and burning resin sweetens the air. Gold flashes at pillars. The dice board is laid. You are there in the hush before the first throw, feeling the cool stone underfoot and the strange tightness in the room. Then the sounds begin. Shakuni's fingers, the little tumble of dice, a breath held too long. Then another cast. Yudhishthira loses. At first it is wealth, jewels, ornaments, treasure, the easy outer skin of kingship. The court stirs, but does not break. Such things can be lost and regained. Then more. Chariots, servants, horses, armies, lands, the very frame of a kingdom. Still the dice click on. Gandhari is not in the center of that hall at first, but the palace carries the game to her through sound. Servants rushing faster than etiquette allows. Messengers pausing at thresholds. One whisper following another, like beads slipping from a torn cord. Lost. Again. She rises. By then, Yudhishthira has gone beyond reason. A gambler in full fall does not see staircase or cliff. He stakes his brothers, loses them. Stakes himself, loses that too. And then, in that stunned, ruinous momentum, he stakes Draupadi. Even now the whole palace seems to flinch around that moment, because there are sentences after which air changes forever. What follows reaches Gandhari first as noise, not words. Noise. A command barked, feet pounding, a woman resisting, silk dragged over stone, voices raised in outrage, then drowned by louder voices. The whole trembles with it. You can smell hot oil from the lamps, sweat from too many bodies, the sharp sourness of fear. The whole palace feels feverish. Somewhere a metal tray falls and spins itself silent. Somewhere women in the inner chambers stop breathing to listen. Draupadi has been brought in, not willing, not gently, dragged. The details come in fragments. Her question to the court. Whether a man who has lost himself can wager his wife. The silence that follows. Vikarna speaking when older men do not. Karna's cruel answer. Dushasana's hands at her robe. The roar of outrage from Bhima. The laughter from the wrong side of the hall. The whole kingdom cracking right along its old fault line. Gandhari moves then. Not with the speed of youth, with something heavier and more urgent. Servants rush to guide her, but she barely needs them. She knows this palace. She knows each turn, each change in echo, each draft of air from open archways. Her blindfold is firm against her brow. Her jewels strike softly at her wrists as she walks. Her breath stays level by force. This is the moment. You can feel it in the skin between your shoulders. Inside the hall, words have become weapons. Bhima has sworn terrible things. Draupadi stands in the storm of male pride and legal argument and still asks the question none of them want to answer. The elders sit trapped in their own silence. Dhritarashtra, blind on his throne, waits one heartbeat too long, and then another. Gandhari enters into that heat like someone stepping into a house already filling with smoke. She does not begin with philosophy. There is no time. She calls the thing by its shape. Madness, disgrace, ruin, invited under the royal roof. She rebukes her husband for letting it come this far. She rebukes her son for greed dressed as victory. She does not spare the hall itself. What use is a court? What use are elders? What use is kingship if a queen can be dragged before them and no one stops the hand at her garment? The room shifts. Not enough, but it shifts. Because even now, with everything so far gone, Gandhari's voice still carries the authority of someone who has denied herself for decades and expects at least that much discipline from others. She turns her force where it must go, toward Dhritarashtra. She tells him to end it now, not later, not after another caste, not after another argument about rules and rights and whether shame counts if wrapped in procedure. Now, Dhritarashtra has sat through too much already. Fear finally reaches where wisdom could not. He hears Bhima's vows, hears the hall turning dark around his house, hears perhaps destiny scratching at the door with iron nails. So he changes, suddenly generous, suddenly fatherly, suddenly full of concern for Draupadi's suffering and the Pandavas' dignity. He offers boons, tells her to ask, to choose what she wants restored. Draupadi, even in humiliation, remains composed enough to save them all as much as she can. She asks first for Yudhishthira's freedom, then for the freedom of the others. Then enough is given to draw them back from the edge. For one brief hour, it seems the house may yet stand. The air loosens. Some men exhale. Servants begin to move again. The smell of panic thins just a little. But Duryodhana is not done. That is the misery of it. Some men witness a cliff edge and step back. He leans forward. He demands another game, another throw, another chance. Exile at stake now. 12 years in the forest, 1 year concealed. Lose and go. You would think the hall itself might crack open in protest. Instead, there is argument, procedure, terms, conditions, the usual furniture of disaster. Gandhari speaks again against it. Of course she does. She tells them enough shame has been piled in one day to bury a dynasty. She tells Dhritarashtra not to surrender the kingdom a second time to his son's appetite. She tells Duryodhana victory taken like this tastes sweet only for a breath and poison for generations. Still, the game is played. Still Yudhishthira accepts. Still Shakuni's dice obey the hand that knows them too well. And so the Pandavas lose again. Exile falls over the hall like evening. There are no cheers now worth hearing, only the exhausted rustle of consequences settling into place. Draupadi must go with her husbands. The princes of the Kuru line divide not by affection or justice, but by road and wound. One house, two futures, both dark. Later, when the hall has emptied and night presses warm against the palace walls, Gandhari sits with the silence that follows catastrophe. The lamps smell tired. You know that smell, oil burned low, wick charred, brass warming under a small last flame. Somewhere beyond her chamber, a guard coughs. Somewhere, a sleepless servant pads down the corridor, carrying folded cloth. The palace has gone quiet in the way sick rooms go quiet. Duryodhana comes to her before midnight. He is flushed with triumph and something like restlessness. A man who has won what he wanted and already cannot enjoy it. He tells her the Pandavas are gone, tells her the kingdom is secure, tells her she should be glad for him at last. Gandhari reaches out and touches his face. The skin is warm, too warm. She tells him there are victories after which mothers do not bless their sons. She tells him he has mistaken possession for safety. She tells him the oaths spoken that day will not fall asleep simply because the hall has emptied. He pulls away, not violently, just enough, as if her hand is heavier than armor. And that is how the night closes, not with reconciliation, not with understanding, with distance measured in inches and fate measured in years. Outside, Hastinapura settles under darkness. The stables breathe warm hay and horse sweat. The courtyards cool. Temple bells ring once, then fade. The moon lays pale silver across parapets and shut doors. Far from the city, the road to the forest begins to gather the footsteps of exiles. Inside the palace, the dice are still, for now, but the sound remains in memory, small and hard as bone. Click on wood, click on stone, click in the hollow place where a family should have chosen love before pride. And Gandhari, queen in darkness, sits listening to a house that has not yet burned down, though already you can smell the smoke. Years pass, the exile ends, and the air itself begins to feel crowded, as if the war has arrived before the armies do. Nothing visible yet, no marching columns, no chariot wheels grinding the roads outside Hastinapura, no conches splitting the dawn. And still, the palace changes. The servants lower their voices without being told. Priests linger longer over fire offerings. Horses in the royal stables stamp and snort at empty corners. Even the peacocks in the courtyards seem to cry with bad timing, always just as someone finishes saying peace is still possible. Gandhari feels it everywhere, in the cloth across her brow, in the stone beneath her bare feet at dawn, in the way Dhritarashtra sleeps badly, turning and turning on linen sheets gone warm in the night. The exile years have passed like a long-held breath. The sons of Pandu have lived in forests, in hermitages, in disguise. They have eaten rough food and worn bark and hidden their names. Then they have returned. They have asked, first with patience, then with dignity sharpened by old humiliation, for what was theirs. And in Hastinapura, the old answer waits like a snake under a basket lid. No, not enough. Not now. Not even 5 villages. Not even that much ground. You are there in the queen's chamber just before sunrise, and the smell is sesame oil, cooling ashes, and the faint sweetness of jasmine, gone limp from yesterday's garlands. Outside, someone sweeps a corridor with a reed broom, soft, patient strokes, as if neat floors could help. Gandhari sits upright on a low couch. She has always known more by listening than most people do by staring. Now listening becomes a torment. Every footstep is a message. Every pause in conversation means someone is afraid to continue. Every little silence around Duryodhana has the shape of a lie. He comes to her often in those days, not as a child anymore, not as the boy who once pressed his face into her lap and demanded that Bhima be made to stop breaking things and winning every wrestling match, not as the prince who sulked, plotted, boasted, and still waited for his mother's hand on his head before sleep. He comes armored in certainty. His ornaments clink when he walks. His breath carries cardamom, betel, and heat. His palms are calloused from mace practice. The room grows tighter around him, as if his pride enters before he does. Gandhari tells him what no one else in that palace can tell him plainly. She tells him he is wrong. She tells him greed has dressed itself up as royal honor. She tells him envy has sat beside him so long he mistakes it for friendship. She tells him that a kingdom held through insult and stubbornness is already cracking. She tells him that Bhishma's loyalty will not save him, Drona's mastery will not save him, Karna's vows will not save him, and Shakuni's cleverness will certainly not save anybody. He listens the way men listen when they have already decided not to hear, patiently, respectfully, uselessly. He says all the expected things, that the Pandavas are dangerous, that yielding once means yielding forever, that kingship is not maintained by softness, that everyone accuses him while secretly admiring strength. That fate will decide. Fate, a wonderful word for men who do exactly what they want. Gandhari does not shout. That is not her way. Her anger is colder than that, more exact. She tells him that fate has very little to do with a prince refusing every chance to step back from a cliff. And because he is still her son, because the body remembers what the mind knows better than to trust, her hand still rises toward him. She still touches his hair once, smooths it back from his forehead as if he were small enough to carry away from disaster. He bows to her. Then he leaves to continue building the disaster with both hands. The heat gathers as the season turns. Dust lies over Hastinapura like a second skin. By afternoon, the palace walls hold the day's warmth and give it back slowly, so even at night, the corridors breathe hot air. Key lamps flicker in their niches. Sandalwood smoke climbs and curls. Somewhere in the inner court, women grind spices for the evening meal, and the scent of cumin and coriander drifts through a house preparing for war. That is the absurd part of palaces. Apocalypse outside. Dinner on time inside. Rice must still be washed. Curtains still shaken. Arguments still had about whether the guest wing has enough mats. Even the end of a dynasty apparently requires a count-in for lamp oil. Krishna comes to the city. Before he arrives, the palace starts vibrating with rumor. Courtyards fill with messengers. Brass vessels are polished. Garlands are strung. The road is sprinkled to hold down dust. Men who have lied for years suddenly become very interested in ritual courtesy. Gandhari hears the change before she hears his name. A steadier movement, a strange confidence in the servants, and under that, nervousness so sharp it almost has a taste. When Krishna enters the Kuru court, the whole city seems to lean in. Gandhari does not see him. She has never seen him. But she knows his presence by what it does to others. Voices lower. Even arrogance becomes careful around him. The air changes as if before rain. He comes not as conqueror, not yet, but as envoy. One last attempt. He asks for peace with the patience of someone offering water to people standing in a burning field. Restore what should be restored. If not the kingdom, then a portion. If not a portion, then enough land for the sons of Pandu to stand on without shame. And Duryodhana refuses. He refuses with all the hard glitter he has polished over the years. No compromise, no concession, nothing given, not even land the size of a needle's point. In another chamber, behind carved doors heavy with old sandalwood, Gandhari hears the report carried in fragments. She hears a servant nearly drop a tray. She hears someone whisper that the prince has gone too far, as if there were still such a thing as too far after the dice hall, after exile, after every warning burned and scattered. Then comes uglier news. There are whispers that Duryodhana and his circle mean to seize Krishna in the court itself, bind him, humiliate him, hold him like a bargaining piece. The thought is so foolish, that it almost becomes funny. Almost. Like trying to lock up a thunderstorm in a grain chest. When the report reaches Gandhari, even she, who has trained herself for stillness, goes cold. She sends word at once. She rebukes her son again. She tells Dhritarashtra to stop this madness if any power remains in his hands at all. Dhritarashtra trembles, laments, delays the old disease. He always sounds most helpless just before allowing the worst thing to continue. Krishna is not taken. He cannot be taken. The attempt collapses under its own stupidity. Men who plan to bind him end up shaken instead, as though they reached toward a lamp flame and found the sun. Afterward, the palace is noisier than before, but less alive, the way a grove sounds after birds explode into flight. You stand with Gandhari near a latticed opening where the evening air creeps in at last. It smells of dust after a little sprinkling of water, horse leather, and night-blooming flowers from the courtyard below. Somewhere far off, a conch sounds from a shrine. Long, low, lonely. She asks for Krishna to come to her privately, and he does. This meeting is quieter than the great assembly. No heralds, no thrones arranged for effect. Only a shaded chamber, lamp smoke, the rustle of cotton, and the weary dignity of two people who understand exactly how near the end has come. Gandhari speaks without ornament. She tells him she knows her son has walked into sin again and again. She tells him she has warned him. She tells him she has not spared him in speech merely because she bore him. She tells him that a mother's love is not blindness, though in her house, blindness has taken many forms. And still she asks, not for victory, not even for justice, sharpened into revenge. She asks for there to be some way, some last narrow crossing, by which this river of ruin might still be avoided. Krishna answers with the sadness of someone standing at the edge of something already falling. He tells her he tried. He tells her peace was offered and thrown aside. He tells her that what has been planted for years is ripening now. Gandhari listens. What else is there to do when a god tells you the storm has already chosen its path? For a moment, though, the chamber softens, because he does not deny her grief before it has arrived. He does not tell her not to love her son. He does not ask her to pretend that righteousness makes loss easier. Outside, the wind stirs the hanging lamps. You can smell hot brass, lamp wick, and the first hint of night jasmine opening in the dark. This is the moment. You can feel it. The whole palace seems to be waiting for one impossible thing. One proud man to become less proud. One father to become decisive. One war to decide not to happen. None of that comes. Instead, there are omens, plenty of those. The sky reddens strangely at dawn. Dogs howl facing empty roads. Cows grow uneasy in their stalls. Vultures circle before any field is sown with the fallen. Images in shrines seem to sweat in the heat. The moon rises with a halo, pale and blurred, like an eye filmed over. Priests mutter. Old women in the kitchens click their tongues. Stable boys sleep with amulets tied around their arms. Everyone says the gods are warning the city, and the city does what cities do. It keeps going. Armor is counted. Arrow shafts are bundled. Chariot axles are greased. Cook fires are lit before dawn to feed men who will soon march out and not all march back. Gandhari moves through these days like someone walking beside a river she can hear but cannot dam. Sometimes Dushasana comes to her full of bluster. Sometimes other sons crowd near, eager, frightened, pretending not to be frightened. They are men now, but around her their old habits return. One clears his throat before speaking. Another fidgets with his bracelet. Another tries too hard to sound brave and ends up sounding 12. She blesses them. What else can a mother do when warning has failed? But each blessing catches in her throat, because blessing is not agreement, because love is not approval, because the hand that rests on a son's head may already be trembling over the place where sorrow will soon sit. Then there is Duryodhana again. Always Duryodhana. He comes to take leave before battle, and the chamber is thick with incense and heat. The cotton of Gandhari's blindfold feels heavy today. The afternoon presses against the shutters. From outside comes the metallic ring of men fastening armor, and from farther away, the low mutter of elephants. She tells him one last time to make peace. One last time, give them their share. Walk away from this before the earth drinks your house. Do not make your mother's womb the source of a nation's ruin. He will not. But he does bow. He kneels. He places his head at her feet. And Gandhari, who has spent a lifetime in darkness by choice, understands that there is one thing left in her that she has never used. Power, stored up. Years of restraint, years of austerity, years of covered sight held inward like banked fire. Her tapas has been gathering in silence, not displayed, not spent. She tells him to come to her again before the final encounter, and to come exactly as he was born, without cloth, without armor, without shame. If her eyes, closed to the world for so long, are opened and turned fully upon him, the force of that long-kept ascetic power may harden his body against harm. It is a mother's last wild offering. Not politics now, not counsel, not morality, just one impossible attempt to save what can still be saved. The day comes. The war has nearly spent itself. Great names have fallen. The field of Kurukshetra lies under dust, broken banners, and the exhausted sun. Duryodhana, hunted and desperate, goes to his mother as instructed. But Krishna meets him first. Of course, Krishna meets him first. He sees the prince hurrying toward the chamber where his mother waits with the blindfold finally ready to be removed. And he says what any god with a taste for timing says at such a moment. Are you truly going before your mother with nothing on? And suddenly, the fate of kingdoms pauses to argue about proper dress. It would be funny if it were not so terrible. Duryodhana hesitates. Pride he can manage. War he can manage. Humiliation in public he has always preferred to inflict rather than receive. But walking naked before his mother, no. Even now, even after 18 days of slaughter, modesty arrives, puffing like an offended court aunt. So he takes leaves, or cloth, enough to cover his loins, enough to preserve a little decorum while the world burns. Then he enters. The chamber is dark and cool after the furnace outside. The floor has been washed. You can smell wet stone, old incense, and the faint medicinal sharpness of sacred herbs. Gandhari stands waiting, hands trembling only once before they steady. For the first time in all these years, she loosens the blindfold. Cloth slips, air touches skin long hidden. Light, after so long, enters like pain. She opens her eyes and she looks at her son. All of it pours through that gaze, the force of penance, the gathered heat of discipline. A mother's desperate love sharpened into something almost unbearable. Her sight travels over him, and where it falls, his body becomes hard as thunder-forged metal, protected, strengthened, sealed against ruin. Then it stops, at the cloth around his waist, at the part he covered, at the one place her gaze cannot bless. She knows at once, a lifetime in darkness, and when she finally opens her eyes, modesty has ruined everything. Her grief flashes into anger so quickly, it almost cracks the air. She asks why he disobeyed. He says, with that stubborn prince's dignity even now, that he could not appear otherwise before his mother. Krishna's advice hangs in the room without needing to be named. Gandhari closes her eyes again. What must light feel like after such a moment? Like mockery, perhaps. Like a door opened too late. The blindfold returns. The cloth settles over her face, and the chamber seems to exhale. Duryodhana leaves, carrying almost invulnerability and one fatal absence. You stand in that silence after he is gone. The smell of the room is still damp stone and extinguished lamp smoke. Gandhari's fingers rest in her lap, very still, not calm. Never confuse stillness with calm. This is the stillness of someone who has done the last thing possible and already knows it was not enough. Outside, the war waits for no one. Bhima will meet Duryodhana with the mace. The old vow will return. The uncovered thighs will matter. So much in this family comes down to remembered gestures. A thigh slapped in mockery years before. A queen dragged by the hair. A cloth tied over a bride's eyes. Dice cast, oaths sworn. And now a strip of cloth at exactly the wrong moment. Fate, people will say later. But in the palace, before the end, it feels smaller and sadder than that. A son too proud, a mother too late, a god who understands men well enough to redirect disaster by one handspan. Evening settles over Hastinapura. The heat breaks a little. Bats flicker above the courtyards. Somewhere, servants light fresh lamps, and the smell of ghee rises sweet and thick. Someone folds unused garments. Someone else counts copper vessels. In another room, Dhritarashtra asks again, for news no husband should have to hear, and no king should have permitted to become necessary. And Gandhari sits in darkness once more. Around her, the palace murmurs like a seashell full of distant trouble. Anklets pass in the hall. A maid sets down water in a bronze lota. Night wind touches the edges of the curtains. From far, very far, there comes the dull idea of drums. The mother has warned. The queen has pleaded. The ascetic has spent her hidden fire. Now only the war remains. And in her covered darkness, where memory is sharper than sight, Gandhari waits for the sound of the world breaking. And then there is nothing left to stop. The drums are packed, the conches are polished. 18 days wait like a storm over dry grass. Before dawn, Hastinapura is already awake. You can feel it before you hear it. The palace stones are cooler than usual under bare feet. The air sharp with lamp smoke, old incense, and the damp smell of water splashed over courtyards before sunrise. Servants move quickly and say very little. Armor buckles. Horses snort in the dark. Somewhere far off, a conch is tested once, and the note hangs over the city like a blade. Gandhari sits upright before the sound fully fades. She has slept very little. Dhritarashtra has slept less. Neither says so. What is there to say now? Their sons are on the field. Their nephews are on the field. Bhishma is on the field. Drona is on the field. Karna is waiting his turn like a fire covered by ash. Even the wind seems to know better than to come in singing. Beside her, Dhritarashtra asks whether Sanjaya has come. He has not. Not yet. That becomes the shape of these days. Dawn, waiting, dusk, footsteps. A report carried in by one man to two people who do not need imagination, because imagination has already done plenty. Sanjaya comes after the first day's fighting, with dust in his throat and the smell of chariot leather clinging to him. He bows, he begins, and at once the room fills with Kurukshetra. Not the whole field, never the whole field, only pieces, conches, elephant bells, arrows falling thick as rain, standards whipping in hot wind, the roar of Bhima, the answering cries from Gandhari's sons, the old power of Bhishma moving through the Kaurava ranks like a storm no one wants and everyone depends on. Gandhari listens without moving. That is her labor now, to sit still while the world breaks in installments. Sanjaya tells them the grandsire fought magnificently. He tells them the armies surged and reeled, advanced and drew back. Great kings fell. Young men whose names had only just entered the court registers were gone by sunset. The earth drank deeply on that first day. Dhritarashtra asks the same question in 10 different forms. How did Bhishma stand? Did Duryodhana hold his ground? Did the sons of Pandu falter? Who protected whom? Who fled? Who remained? A blind king, clutching details like prayer beads. Gandhari asks fewer questions, but the ones she asks make the room tighten. She wants the names, not the boasts, not the formations, not the heroic flourish. Names. Who did not return? And Sanjaya gives them. Each one lands softly, then stays. By the third day, the palace has learned the rhythm of sorrow. In the morning, the cooks still prepare too much rice. By evening, the trays come back half-touched. The corridors begin to change. Bangles are quieter. Anklets disappear. Lamps burn longer in women's chambers. The wives of princes start listening for footsteps the way desert people listen for rain. Every sound becomes possibly the one. You are standing in one of those long halls at dusk when the first widow realizes before anyone speaks. She hears the messenger pause outside her chamber. That pause tells her everything. Silk brushes stone, a metal tray slips from somebody's hand. Then the weeping begins, low and shocked, like water finding a crack. After that, the palace never really becomes quiet again. It only learns new kinds of quiet. On the fourth day, Gandhari sends for the women of the household, not all at once. That would become a flood, a few at a time. Daughters-in-law, mothers, sisters, girls still too young to know the proper weight of their own jewels. She has them seated near her on rugs that smell faintly of sandal and wool. She touches their heads, their hands, their shoulders. Some are trembling, some are rigid. One of them has not stopped twisting the edge of her veil for so long that threads have come loose. Gandhari tells them what no one else in that palace can tell them with authority. They will endure the day, then the next one too. It is not comfort, exactly, but it is a wall to lean against. Meanwhile, the war goes on. Bhishma carries the Kaurava host for day after day. Sanjaya's voice almost changes when he speaks of him. Even fatigue cannot flatten the old man's force. He seems to be everywhere at once. Standards fall around him. Chariots break before him. Men who had grown up hearing of Bhishma's greatness spend their last moments discovering it was not exaggerated. Duryodhana takes courage from this. You can almost hear it in Sanjaya's report. The prince's confidence rising, his words sharpening, his hope returning in dangerous amounts. Hope can be more reckless than fear. Fear, at least, makes a man sit down sometimes. Gandhari knows her son. She hears the shape of him, even through another man's telling. He's still proud, still sure, still leaning his whole weight onto Bhishma like a child climbing an old tree and assuming roots never fail. Then the 10th day comes. The air in the palace is strange from the start. Even before Sanjaya arrives, even before a runner is announced, there is a pressure in the walls, a hush among servants, a flatness in every footstep. Midday passes too slowly. The ghee in the lamps grows soft in the heat. Somewhere pigeons flutter in the rafters and then go still. When Sanjaya finally enters, Gandhari knows this is not another evening. Bhishma has fallen, not gone from the world yet, not fully, but fallen. Arjuna's arrows have brought him down while Shikhandin stood before him, and Bhishma, holding to his vow, would not strike. So he fell onto a bed of shafts, upheld by the very weapons that brought him low. And there he remains, alive, radiant, terrible still. Dhritarashtra breaks. He had leaned on Bhishma for most of his life, the way a damaged house leans on one surviving pillar. Now that pillar is horizontal in a field of dust. Gandhari does not cry at first. She bows her covered head, and for a long moment she says nothing. The cloth across her eyes is still, but her hands tighten on the edge of her seat until the knuckles rise. Bhishma, the old authority in the palace corridors, the man whose footsteps servants recognized from half a courtyard away, the one person who seemed made of iron law and winter river water, down, and still the war continues. That is the insult of it. Even Bhishma's fall cannot stop the machine once it is rolled downhill. Night settles over Hastinapura, heavy and windless. The smell of jasmine from the inner courtyards has turned almost bitter in the heat. No musicians play. No one asks for stories. Somewhere in the women's wing, a child asks when his father is coming home, and the nurse, poor woman, pretends she has suddenly become fascinated by rearranging cushions. The next morning, Drona takes command. Of course he does. When one mountain falls, another is expected to stand up immediately and get back to work. Royal families are very efficient that way when it comes to disaster. Sanjaya reports Drona's skill with the weary respect of a man forced to admire ruin. The teacher turns battlefield into geometry, formations folding, opening, closing, drawing men apart from one another. Gandhari listens to the names as they move through his account. Yudhishthira nearly seized, Arjuna drawn away, one plan inside another. Then comes the day Abhimanyu enters the Chakravyuha. That news reaches Hastinapura like a hot wind. The young son of Arjuna, Subhadra's boy, bright and fierce, goes in where seasoned men hesitate. He breaks the formation. He is cut off, surrounded, brought down before his father can return. The palace receives that grief too, though it belongs to the other side. That is one of the cruelties of this house. The walls know both branches of the family. Nurses once carried all these children. Old servants heard them shouting in the same practice yards. A boy lost there is still a boy remembered here. Gandhari sits through the report with her breathing very even. But when Sanjaya speaks the details of the encirclement, the many against one, the breaking of fairness under pressure, her head lifts sharply. She says nothing for a while. Then she asks whether Duryodhana was there. Sanjaya answers carefully, yes, and others as well. Drona, Karna, Kripa, Dushasana's son, Jayadratha holding the gate. The names lie in the room like embers. Gandhari knows what this means. Not only that a child has fallen, that a line has been crossed so plainly even exhausted men will remember where they stepped over it. That night, the palace air feels close and breathless. Even the curtains seem heavy. You can smell hot stone, stale flowers, and the faint iron scent of weapons recently carried through halls where weapons were never meant to be. Women pray in whispers. Priests murmur over little flames that lean and flutter in brass bowls. Dhritarashtra asks what Arjuna will do. No one in the room has to guess. The answer arrives with the next day's report. Arjuna has sworn Jayadratha will fall before sunset. And then the war becomes not only slaughter, but a chase against light itself. All day, Hastinapura waits. Sanjaya does not come until the sky has already reddened. His sandals scrape. Dust trickles from the hem of his garment. He smells of sun, horse sweat, and the bitter smoke of exhausted men. Jayadratha is gone, he says. Arjuna reached him. The sun seemed lost and found again in the same breath. Confusion seized the field. Then the arrow flew, and Jayadratha's end came with it. Dhritarashtra groans aloud. Gandhari presses her palm against the floor beside her, grounding herself on cool stone. But Sanjaya is not finished. The fighting continued into the night. And night on a battlefield is another country. Ghatotkacha rose in darkness like a storm born from forest shadows, terrifying the Kaurava host. Formations broke, elephants panicked, men struck at things they barely understood. The sky itself seemed crowded with illusion and fire. Then Karna spent the weapon he had hoarded for Arjuna. He used it to bring down Ghatotkacha. The giant Rakshasa prince fell, and with him a strange, dangerous brightness passed out of the night. Karna has saved the army, Sanjaya says, and lost something he cannot replace. Gandhari hears the strain beneath those words. Even now, the war is eating tomorrow, while people are still bleeding from today. Day follows day. Drona continues, fierce and terrible. Virata falls. Drupada falls. The old alliances crack under the weight of him. Still he advances. Still he cuts through hope as though it were cloth. And then at last comes the report Gandhari almost expected from the moment he took command. Drona is down. Not by a clean clash of weapon against weapon, not by simple strength, by grief. Bhima slew an elephant named Ashwathama. The name was cried out. Yudhishthira, pressed into the cruel work of war, spoke words that were true and not true enough. Drona believed his son was gone. His spirit bent. He laid down his arms. Dhrishtadyumna reached him there. Dhritarashtra recoils at this. Even he, who allowed so much to happen, feels the chill of a teacher brought to stillness by sorrow. Gandhari sits very quiet. Her sons are on one side. Her conscience is not always. She knows too well what it is to love a child so deeply that the mere rumor of his fall could hollow out the world. She imagines Drona hearing that name, Ashwathama. Only that, enough. The palace that night smells of burnt wick and old grief. No one bothers with perfume. What would be the point? Sorrow has its own odor, salt, smoke, unwashed cloth, and the faint sourness of food gone untouched. Then Karna takes command. When Sanjaya speaks his name, something shifts in the room. Dhritarashtra clings to it at once. Karna, the unconquered one, the loyal one, the friend who never left Duryodhana's side. A final pillar, bright and dangerous. Gandhari has always known Karna was more than he seemed. His voice in court, his heat, his wounded pride sharpened into splendor. But she does not know the whole truth yet. That comes too late, as all the worst truths do. The first day under Karna is devastating. He He tears through the field with the desperate force of a man who has wagered his whole life on one proving ground. Yudhishthira himself is shamed and sent back stung with anger. The Pandavas feel the pressure. The Kauravas breathe a little easier for one evening only. Then comes the 17th day. By now the palace is full of gaps. Whole suites of rooms stand untouched. Jewelry boxes remain closed. No one argues over seating at meals because too many places no longer need setting. Even the pigeons in the courtyard seem to coo more softly, as if they too have been warned. You are in the outer hall when a group of women passes in silence, and the silence is what unnerves you. No wailing, no collapse, just exhausted feet, loosened braids, and the smell of dust carried in with them from the city gates. Grief can burn so long it stops making flames. Sanjaya arrives late. Vrishasena, Karna's son, has fallen to Arjuna before his father's eyes. The duel everyone had dreaded, or prayed for, or both, has finally come. Karna and Arjuna met in full fury. Krishna driving one chariot, Shalya the other. The armies drew back enough to watch. Weapons flashed. Standards snapped. Arrows crossed so thick the sky seemed woven shut. Karna loosed a serpent weapon that should have ended Arjuna. Krishna drove the chariot down at the critical instant. The missile took only the diadem. The chance passed. Then the old curses ripened. Karna's wheels sank in the torn earth. His memory failed him when he needed sacred words. He struggled there between pride and doom, asking for the fairness war had already abandoned long before it came for him. Arjuna's arrow ended it. Karna fell. For a long time, no one in Gandhari's chamber says a single word. Dhritarashtra exhales as if struck. Duryodhana's great friend, his chosen brother, in all but birth, gone. And then, before the room can even recover from that blow, another truth walks in behind it. Kunti has spoken. Karna was her firstborn son, the eldest Pandava. A child set adrift and returned to the family only when no return could matter. It reaches Gandhari not on the battlefield, but in the shattered quiet after. One more secret arriving, with ashes still in its hair. She bows her head. So that was the fire in him. So that was the ache. All those years he stood in her halls like a man barred from a house that was secretly his own. No wonder fate kept circling him like a hawk. No wonder no one could quite look away. Not metaphorically, not poetically. A mother hears that and feels the whole world turn strange under her feet. For somewhere on the field lies not only Duryodhana's friend, not only Arjuna's enemy, but Kunti's hidden son, and another branch of this family has been chopped through at the root by its own hand. Night barely passes. The 18th day rises hard and dry. There is almost nothing left now except momentum and vows. Shalya takes command and falls. The Kaurava host breaks apart. Duryodhana flees the field, wounded, alone, carrying his mace into reeds and water. For a little while he hides in a lake, preserving himself inside stillness, as though stillness has ever solved anything in this family. But they find him. And when Sanjaya brings this last report, his voice is scraped raw. Duryodhana came out. He chose the mace. He fought Bhima. They circled, struck, reeled, rose again. Two men carrying childhood hatred like extra muscle in their arms. The earth shook under them. The surviving warriors watched. Then Bhima, remembering his oath from the dice hall, brought the blow down where the rules said he should not. Duryodhana fell with his thighs broken. He did not pass at once. He lay there breathing, proud even in ruin, speaking of kingship of wrongs, of victory soured by how it was taken. But the end had opened. Dhritarashtra cries out then, with no kingliness left in him at all. Just a father, just an old man, hearing that the son he could not govern is now stretched on the ground under an indifferent sky. Gandhari does not cry out. Her grief goes inward first, a terrible inwardness. She has spent a lifetime containing fire. Now it has nowhere else to go. That night, Hastinapura feels less like a palace than a shell after the creature has gone. Corridors breathe emptiness. The smell of old garlands, dust, and lamp oil clings to the walls. Somewhere, a single conch sounds from a temple tower, and the note is so lonely it seems almost embarrassed to be heard. Then comes the last horror. Ashwathama, Kripa, and Kritavarma survive the war's daylight and choose the dark instead. In the sleeping camp, they strike down the sons of Draupadi, Drishtadyumna, and many others at rest. News of that reaches the city like poison poured into water already bitter. By then, grief has become too large to sort properly. Victory and defeat are both covered in ash. At last, Gandhari goes to the field. The journey from Hastinapura to Kurukshetra feels endless, though the wheels keep turning. Dust rises around the chariots. The sun is merciless. The smell reaches them before the field itself does. Burnt wood, trampled earth, extinguished fires, sweat dried into cloth, funeral offerings, wet river mud from rites already begun. You are there with her when she steps down. The ground is uneven underfoot. Broken shafts crunch softly. Cloth flutters from torn standards. Vultures lift away heavily from the distance, annoyed at being interrupted in such a busy season. Priests murmur, women sob until their voices roughen. Gandhari walks among what remains. Vyasa grants her sight for this hour, and after a lifetime of chosen darkness, the world comes upon her all at once. Not palace lamps, not a husband's face, not her own reflection. This, Kurukshetra, under the pale, pitiless light. Sons, nephews, kings, teachers, friends, horses collapsed beside chariots, gold dulled by dust, banners torn and lying like fallen branches after a storm. It is too much for any one pair of eyes, and yet she sees. Duryodhana lies there, still beautiful in the face, broken below, royal even in defeat. Dushasana lies elsewhere, the terrible boy she birthed, and the terrible man he became, now equally still. Other sons surround them in all the final arrangements fate had chosen, some clasping weapons, some half-turned as if still trying to answer a challenge, some quiet at last in a way they never were in life. She goes to them one by one. This is the cruel arithmetic only a mother can do, not numbers anymore. Foreheads, hands, hair, the remembered weight of a child once asleep across her lap somehow still present in a warrior no longer breathing. She grieves for them without pretending innocence. That is what makes it heavier. She knows what they were. She knows what they did. She knows the dice hall happened. She knows warnings were refused. She knows pride sat at her own table and she fed it. Still, these are her sons, loved anyway, loved disastrously, loved completely. The women of the house move around her like broken waves. Widows find husbands by ornaments, by scars, by the shape of a hand. Mothers call names that no one answers. Draupadi mourns her sons. Subhadra mourns Abhimanyu. Kunti stands with pain she can no longer divide into manageable portions. Somewhere between the pyres and the torn banners, grief stops belonging to one side. It belongs to the field. And then Gandhari comes to Krishna. He is standing there calm in the aftermath, dust on his feet, the smell of smoke in his hair, The same Krishna who spoke for peace and guided war, who smiled in court and steered destiny with a firm hand on the reins. Gandhari turns toward him with sight still burning in her. All the words stored through 18 days rise together. She tells him he could have stopped this. He had the power. He had the wisdom. He had the authority men listened to when they wished to. He moved through kings as easily as wind through banners. And still this happened. She does not spare him. Her voice is not wild. That would be easier to dismiss. It is scorched clean. She says he watched the Kurus destroy one another and did not prevent it. She says he let her sons go to their end. She says if such ruin could unfold beneath his gaze, then his own house should not stand untouched forever. The curse comes out of her like a final flame. May the Yadavas too destroy one another. May he see his clan consumed. May he come at last to loneliness and the end in the wilderness. The air around them seems to hold still. Even now, after everything, it is a fearful thing to hear a woman like Gandhari speak from the center of her grief. Krishna does not turn away. He accepts the curse, not with mockery, not with anger. He receives it as one receives rain already long gathering in the clouds. He tells her the Yadavas too carry the seeds of their own destruction. Her words will ripen what is already growing. That answer does not soothe. Nothing could, but it does not bounce off her either. It settles into the ash-choked air among all the rest. The truths too late, the warnings ignored, the love that could not save, the righteousness that came carrying weapons. By evening, the pyres begin in earnest. Smoke lifts over Kurukshetra in long grey veils. Ghee crackles in the fire. Priests chant by the river, while the wind pushes heat against tired faces. The Ganga receives ashes, flowers, tears, oil, and the names of men who once thought themselves permanent. Gandhari stands through more of it than anyone thinks she should. You can feel the heat on your skin beside her, the grit of dust collecting at the hem, the ache in your legs from standing so long among the dead and the grieving and the endless formalities that follow disaster. Even the greatest war in the world still requires logs counted, cloth brought, water fetched, fires tended. Apocalypse is, among other things, a tremendous amount of work for exhausted people. At last, the light begins to soften. The cries from the field grow hoarse, then lower, then become only the occasional broken sound from one pyre or another. Smoke drifts toward the reddening sky. Ash settles on shoulders like pale pollen. Gandhari's sight, granted for this reckoning, begins to recede. Darkness comes back to her. Not the same darkness as before, never the same. She has now seen the end of the house she entered as a young bride with cloth over her eyes and iron in her resolve. She has seen what ambition ripens into. She has seen sons she warned and could not turn. She has seen Krishna himself and cursed him with a mother's scorched mouth. Now the world closes again. The blindfold returns to be not symbol, not vow, not pride, just cloth, just darkness, just one woman standing in a field where the earth is still warm. Around her, the fires burn lower. Behind her, Hastinapura waits with too many empty rooms. Ahead of her, only aftermath. And over Kurukshetra, as night rises slowly through the smoke, the last of the day's light catches on the river and trembles there for a moment, gold, then red, then gone. Morning comes anyway. The lamps are out now. The halls are cooler. Somewhere beyond the palace, a conch sounds for dawn worship, and the sound feels gentler than war ever did. So after all of that, the blindfold, the birds, the dice, the ashes, let's sit for a moment with what Gandhari's life leaves behind. With Gandhari, it begins with something that looks noble from the outside and feels far more complicated once you live beside it. She binds her own eyes. It is an act of loyalty. It is an act of love. It is also an act of renunciation. She refuses an advantage her husband does not have. She chooses to share his darkness rather than stand over him in constant silent superiority. That matters. She is never presented as small. It gives her tremendous dignity from the beginning. But it also shows something harder. A vow, even a beautiful one, is not the same as dharma. Dharma is deeper than a gesture. It is deeper than personal virtue. It is the right thing, done in the right way, at the right time, in harmony with truth. Gandhari's blindfold gives her moral grandeur, yes, but it also becomes part of her tragedy. She chooses not to see, and in a house already thick with ambition, that choice carries a cost. That is one of the big truths resting inside her life. You can be sincere and still be mistaken. You can be noble and still leave something unattended. You can sacrifice greatly and still not stop disaster. That is not some punishment laid neatly over her life. That is the story being honest about how difficult life is. You can feel that honesty all through the palace years. The stone floors are cool. The incense burns. Servants move softly through corridors. Children are born, fed, praised, dressed in silk, taught their lessons. Life keeps looking ordinary, even while ruin is growing at the center of it. That is Maya. Not that the world is unreal, like a cheap trick. More that what you first see is never the whole of it. A palace can look stable and already be cracking. A mother can feel love and still be feeding attachment. A kingdom can speak of honor while walking towards smoke. Gandhari's motherhood carries that lesson with heartbreaking force. She loves fiercely. No one can doubt it. She endures the terrible strangeness of that pregnancy, the fear, the shame, the long waiting, and then the miracle of those 100 sons. After that, of course, she clings to them. Of course she does. If you had waited in darkness that long, you would too. And that is where karma begins to gather around her life. Karma is not a little reward and punishment machine dropping coins into bowls. It is the web made by action, choice, habit, and consequence. It is what grows slowly and steadily from what we do and refuse to do. Gandhari does warn Duryodhana. She does rebuke him. She does speak for peace when peace is still possible. The story honors that, but it also shows that love mixed with attachment becomes partial. She knows her son is walking the wrong road. Still, he is her son. That still is everything. That is why she feels so human. She is not cold righteousness. She is not blind affection. She is both at once, and the pull between them tears her life open. You can almost rest in that recognition because it explains so much of the epic's sorrow. The people in this world are rarely choosing between obvious good and obvious evil. They are choosing between loyalty and truth, between family and justice, between private tenderness and public duty. That is Gandhari's battlefield, long before Kurukshetra ever fills with chariots. And when the dice fall, the story makes another thing painfully clear. Silence in the face of adharma does not remain silence. It becomes part of the deed. Adharma is not just wickedness with a snarling face. Sometimes it is hesitation. Sometimes it is weakness. Sometimes it is knowing and not stopping. The hall where Draupadi is humiliated is full of people who still think of themselves as honorable. That is why the scene burns so fiercely. Evil does not always enter wearing ashes and skulls. Sometimes it arrives perfumed, jeweled, properly seated in court. Gandhari cannot undo that hall. Even stepping in later, even saving what can still be saved, she cannot unmake what has already been allowed. And that too is part of the teaching. There are moments in life when delay is itself a decision. By the time the war comes, Gandhari has become one of the clearest voices in the palace. She sees more without sight than others do with open eyes. She understands that victory gained through greed will poison the hand that holds it. She understands that a mother's blessing cannot turn injustice into righteousness. She understands that dharma cannot be bent forever around personal desire without eventually snapping back. But understanding a thing does not always give you power over it. That is another tender sadness in her life. Even the wise cannot always save the people they love from themselves. You can hear the Mahabharata breathing there, not harshly, just steadily. Dharma matters. It matters completely. But following it is not neat. It does not guarantee comfort. It does not always rescue your house from grief. Gandhari is disciplined, faithful, austere, devoted. And still the war comes. So what does that mean? It means dharma is not magic. It is not a charm against suffering. It is the effort to stand rightly in a world where others may still choose wrongly. Gandhari keeps trying to stand there. Sometimes she does it beautifully. Sometimes she does it too late. Sometimes her love clouds her judgment. Sometimes her grief scorches even her holiness, and she turns on Krishna himself with a curse born from unbearable loss. And even that does not make her false. It makes her complete. The ancient rishis wanted you to understand that great souls are not made of polished wood. They are not simple. They ache. They fail in particular ways. Their virtues shine brightest exactly where their wounds are deepest. Gandhari's wound is attachment, not petty attachment, sacred, maternal, enormous attachment. She is asked to love and to judge, to bless and to restrain, to be mother to her sons and moral witness to their deeds. No one can hold those roles without trembling. By the end, standing among the fallen, she becomes something unforgettable, a woman who was right too often, obeyed too little, and left to grieve almost everything. Her sorrow becomes larger than blame, larger than court politics, larger even than victory and defeat. That is where the story finally settles, not in argument, in recognition. Love without wisdom can become blindness. Wisdom without courage can become silence. Duty without compassion becomes hardness. Compassion without truth becomes indulgence. Gandhari lives where all of those meet, and because she does, her life leaves a quiet final understanding behind. Human beings do not control the whole weave. We act inside it, we shape it, and are shaped by it. We inherit karma, add to karma, suffer from karma, and sometimes awaken through it. The best we can do is refuse self-deception. Love without clinging, and act before wrong hardens into fate. That is the peace inside her story. Not that she saved everything, not that she ruined everything, but that she reveals how fragile goodness becomes when it cannot detach from its own beloveds. And still, even with all that sorrow, the story does not take away her dignity. It leaves her standing, blindfolded queen, grieving mother, woman of iron restraint and breakable heart. If you have followed her this far, you do not need to solve her. You only need to understand her. She loved deeply, she saw late, she warned truly, she suffered fully. And in that long arc, the old storytellers placed a lamp for anyone trying to live inside family, duty, and loss without losing the soul. The flame is small, but steady, and for tonight, that is enough. Years pass, the tears thin, though never enough, and Gandhari takes one final road away from the palace. At first, not yet. There are still rites to finish, still ashes to gather, still rooms in Hastinapura that seem to wait for footsteps that will never return. The city lives because cities do that. Stubbornly, improperly, almost offensively. Cooks grind spices before dawn. Temple bells ring. Water slaps stone at the ghats. Children, who were too young to understand the war, begin laughing in courtyards again. And in the palace, Gandhari remains. She stays beside Dhritarashtra in those long after years when grief grows quieter but heavier, like wet wool laid over the shoulders. Yudhishthira serves them with care. He bows. He asks after their comfort. He orders soft bedding, warm oil, proper food, attendants who know how to move silently. He means it. That is part of what makes it ache. Because kindness, after such ruin, does not undo anything. It only sits there gently, like a lamp before a cracked wall. You can feel the strange air of those palace evenings. Sandalwood smoke in the halls, the faint sweetness of old garlands, rice steaming in distant kitchens, silk whispering against stone, somewhere a widow reciting prayers under her breath. Dhritarashtra grows older inside his sorrow. He has always been a large man, a kingly man, but now the weight of him seems to fold inward. His hands search for familiar things, the arm of a chair, the carved edge of a pillar, Gandhari's presence beside him. And Gandhari is still there, blindfold on, back straight, voice measured. Kunti is there too, often near them, moving like someone who has already offered everything to grief and still found more to give. Between these three old figures, the palace air changes, less court, more shrine. Sometimes they speak of the past, sometimes they do not. Often the silence says enough. Bhima, though, is Bhima. He cannot always keep the old fire from his mouth. At meals, in corridors, in moments when memory catches him by the throat, he lets hard words slip. He remembers poison in childhood, the dice hall, exile, the field of Kurukshetra. He remembers too much, and he remembers it loudly. Dhritarashtra hears him. So does Gandhari, and every sharp word lands like a dropped stone in a room already full of cracks. Yudhishthira tries to smooth these moments over. He's forever mending, forever apologizing, forever holding together a family that has already been broken and burned and buried. Poor man, even after winning the kingdom, he has inherited the impossible household. A throne, it turns out, is also paperwork and grief. Years pass this way, 15 of them, by some tellings, long enough for the seasons to circle and circle. Long enough for the war to become something younger people discuss in lowered voices, as if it were both history and haunting. Then one day, the old king has had enough of walls. Dhritarashtra turns toward the forest. Not as a fugitive this time, not as a man denied, as a man finished. He decides to leave the palace and take up the life of retirement and austerity. No more royal chambers, no more servants hovering with trays, no more hearing Bhima's footsteps and wondering whether pity or bitterness approaches. He will go to the woods, he will wear bark, he will eat little, he will wait for the end where kings used to wait for such things, under trees, beside rivers, with the wind as witness. Gandhari does not hesitate. Of course she goes with him. How could she not? She bound her life to his in darkness when she was young. She walked with him through ambition, suns, ruin, and smoke. She is not about to stop at the final mile. And then Kunti does something that hushes everyone. She says she will go too. The mother of the victors, the queen who could stay, the elder who could spend her last years in comfort among sons and grandsons and dutiful attendants. She turns from all of it. You're standing there in the court when the decision settles over the room. You can almost hear the intake of breath. Cotton garments rustle. Someone drops a brass vessel and it rings against the floor. No one stoops for it right away. Yudhishthira is struck silent. Bhima protests. Arjuna's voice breaks. Nakula and Sahadeva stand as if the ground has shifted under them all over again. But Kunti has made her choice. She has carried secrets long enough. She has watched too many sons walk toward suffering. Her road now bends away from the palace toward ash-colored mornings and cold river baths. So they prepare. The ornaments come off. That part matters. Gold unclasped from wrists, heavy necklaces lifted away, silk folded and set aside, perfumed oils replaced by plain water, soft garments traded for bark cloth and rough coverings that scratch the skin. The palace attendants weep while dressing them for renunciation. They had once braided royal hair and fastened jeweled girdles. Now they knot austere robes with trembling fingers. No one looks dignified in bark at first. It is stiff. It sits badly. It makes everybody feel like an irritated tree. Even sorrow, for a flicker of a moment, must make room for the practical absurdity of it. Then the moment passes. The day of departure comes with a pale sky and a wind carrying dust from the road. Citizens gather, priests chant. Conches do not sound this time in triumph or alarm, only soft and low, as if the city itself is exhaling. Dhritarashtra walks slowly, Gandhari beside him, Kunti nearby, Vidura with them for a time, Sanjaya too, faithful as ever, the old witness still following the old king. The Pandavas trail behind like sons returning once more to childhood, helpless before a parent's leaving. You can smell river mud on the morning air, smoke from cooking fires, crushed tulsi beneath many feet. The heat has not yet risen fully, and for one brief stretch of time, the world feels almost merciful. At the edge of the city, farewells begin. Hands touch feet, foreheads press to hands. Blessings are given through tears. Dhritarashtra speaks to Yudhishthira with the gravity of a man handing over not a kingdom, but a burden. Rule well, be patient, guard the people. Do not let anger choose for you. Gandhari blesses them too. Bhima bows to her. That one is important. All the old rage, all the history between her motherhood and his vows. And still he bows. And she, who lost sons to his hands, places blessing over him. Not because the wound is gone, because this is what remains when everything else has burned away. Then they turn and they go. The forest life strips away noise first. No heralds, no dice, no debates in polished halls, no armor buckles clinking at dawn. Only birds, only leaves, only the creak of old limbs settling on woven mats. Their hermitage rises near the river, simple and spare. The air smells of wet earth in the mornings, smoke in the evenings, and sun-warmed bark all afternoon. Water jars stand cooling in shade. Deer move at the edge of vision, or what would be vision for others. For Gandhari, there is still darkness, but it is a cleaner darkness now. Not cloth and palace and guarded corridors. Forest darkness, honest darkness. She wakes before dawn, bathes in cold water that bites the skin awake, offers prayer, eats little, speaks less. Dhritarashtra sits long in meditation. Kunti serves, prays, gathers, endures. There is peace here, though not the easy kind, the hard kind, the one earned after a lifetime of being broken open. Seasons move around them. Summer comes first, with hot winds and crackling leaves. The ground bakes, tree roots clutch dry earth. Even the river shrinks a little at the banks, exposing mud that smells rich and ancient. Then the rains arrive, and suddenly everything changes. The first monsoon hits with that smell, before the drops even fall, dust surrendering, parched leaves waking, the whole forest breathing out. Rain drums on the hut roof. Frogs begin their ridiculous celebration at once, as if they personally arranged the clouds. Water runs in silver threads from every branch. Gandhari sits listening. After a life of palace whispers and battlefield reports, now she hears rain, just rain. In the rainy season, the river grows strong again. In winter, the mornings sharpen. Breath turns pale in the air. Their bark garments feel colder then. Their hands stiffen, yet they remain. Pilgrims sometimes visit. Ascetics come and go. Sages speak with Dhritarashtra. Some bring news from the kingdom. Yudhishthira comes too, at times, with his brothers and Draupadi and others of the household. They walk the forest paths with careful steps, leaving behind the fragrance of city oils and washed cotton. Their grief is older now, less wild, more settled. When they meet, there is tenderness, no grand speeches, no need. A son offers fruit. An old mother touches his head. An old father asks if the kingdom is at peace. A queen, who once heard armies gather, now asks whether the people are fed. You're there under the trees when these visits happen. Sunlight comes down in broken gold through sal leaves. Ants march over roots like tiny officials with urgent business. Somewhere overhead, a koil calls and calls, as if it has only one thought and intends to repeat it forever. Then one day, Vidura Zen comes quietly, deep in ascetic practice, until he is almost more spirit than man. Sanjaya remains a while longer. The old world keeps thinning. At last, even the visits become fewer. That is how the ending approaches in these old stories. Not like a door slammed shut. More like a lamp with very little oil left, still steady, still bright at the center, just growing smaller. One afternoon, after years in the forest, the air turns strange, too hot, too still. Birdsong stops first, then comes the smell. Dry leaves, resin, a bitterness on the wind, forest fire, not a battle fire, not lacquer and treachery, not the planned flame of men with schemes in their hearts. This is the summer forest taking one long, fierce breath. The wind rises, branches crackle, smoke threads through the trees, heat gathers before the flames are even visible, brushing the skin like an opening of a door. Sanjaya sees the danger and urges them to flee. Quickly now, this way. While there is time, old feet can still move if fear lifts them. But Dhritarashtra is old. Gandhari is old. Kunti is old. And more than that, they are done with running. There is no panic in them. That is the part to remember. No wild scrambling, no clutching at bundles, no desperate bargaining with fate. Dhritarashtra understands. Gandhari understands. Kunti too. They tell Sanjaya to go on without them. He resists, of course. Loyal men always do. They never know when to stop being loyal, even at the very end. But he is commanded, and at last he obeys, stumbling away through smoke and wind, weeping as he goes. The three elders stay. Perhaps they sit facing east, perhaps side by side. Perhaps Gandhari's hand finds Dhritarashtra's one last time. The fire comes nearer, with a sound like many silks shaken out at once, like dry applause from the whole forest. Heat thickens. The smell of burning wood fills the breath. Ash begins to settle on skin and bark garments, soft as grey pollen. You are there with them in that last stillness. No palace now, no throne, no suns to count, no war left to dread, only the warmth growing around them, and the strange calm of a burden loosening after being carried too long. Gandhari, who covered her eyes for a husband. Gandhari, who bore 100 sons into an ominous world. Gandhari, who warned and grieved and endured. Gandhari, who stood in a palace and in a field of ash and did not turn away from sorrow, even when she could not see it. Now the forest receives her. The fire closes. The old forms pass from the world. The long vow ends. Later, the news reaches the kingdom. There is mourning again, yes, but softer. Different, less like a wound torn open, more like a final lamp lowered into the river at dusk. People speak her name with the old astonishment still inside it. Gandhari. In some houses they remember the blindfold first. In some, the 100 sons. In some, the curse she laid upon Krishna from a heart burned hollow by grief. But in the quietest remembering, it is none of those alone. It is her steadiness, the way she remained, the way love in her became discipline, then sorrow, then something almost like fire itself, dangerous, purifying, impossible to hold. And if you imagine northern winds moving over the stony lands of Gandhara, and then southward through the plains to Hastinapura, and farther still to the forest where dry leaves gather in deep brown beds, you can almost feel how her life traveled. Princess, bride, queen, mother, widow, ascetic, ash, and still not lost, because names like hers do not vanish when the body goes. They stay where people remember vows made in youth and paid for in age. They stay in the hush before dawn prayers, in the scent of lamp smoke on old cloth, in the hand that reaches for another hand out of loyalty, habit, tenderness, and pain, all braided together. Night comes to the forest too. After the fire, after the heat, after the long day of smoke, there is always night. Cooler air moves through blackened trunks. Somewhere nearby, water keeps flowing over stone. Far off, a night bird begins again, and over all of it lies that deep Indian silence that is never truly empty. It holds river breath. It holds the memory of chariot wheels. It holds palace dust and monsoon rain, and the faint dry rustle of bark garments in the trees. It holds her. And if you listen long enough, when the world has gone soft and distant, you may almost hear it. The gentle whisper of cloth once tied over faithful eyes, and the forest wind moving at last across an unburdened face. Then even that grows still. Only leaves, only river, only the last warmth fading from the earth, and somewhere beyond sound, beyond smoke, beyond memory, the silence holds.